Cover me when I run. Cover me through the fire. Something like the other dream. Now on my knees. Cover me, darling, please. Hey, monkey, monkey, monkey.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. And here's our host.
Hey guys, Steve Stred. Thank you for joining me, buddy. Now, just to clear just to clear the air, I am as far from professional of a podcaster as you're probably ever used to. It's just kind of goes by the gut of feeling. It's all very spontaneous. So, but I can actually claim that I've actually read your work, so I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass and say, wow, what are your inspirations? What are your influences? I mean, I've legitimately read your work. So I hold that up as like, something to be proud of. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah. So, wow. Wagon Buddy was my first exposure to you. This is my co-host, by the way, one of them anyway, Ben Arzate, fresh off the plane. How many connecting flights, Ben, did it take?
I was in Colorado, and I'm in Iowa, so it was only like an hour and 45-minute flight.
Consider yourself lucky. It took, I don't know. It took at least 6, there and back when I went to Oregon. So, and there was a layover. Had to stay the night at a little shitty Comfort Inn, with tongue in cheek on the word comfort, So, because of a layover, a flight delay or something, because of too much baggage on the plane, it wouldn't have flown right. But so yeah, that shit can be a pain. But so it's getting pretty late out there where you are, right, Steve?
It's only 5:00 here now.
I thought you were in the UK.
No, I'm in Canada.
So almost, but not quite.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people. Canada is almost France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in Quebec.
Do you speak French Canadian?
No, I mean, I used to be, okay in French through elementary school and high school because that was our second language component. And back then, like, because I would have been going through elementary school and then into high school through the 90s. So, back then there was always that expectation that, young Canadians, you'd end up either becoming an NHL player or something. So it was always, ideal if we had that French component in case we ended up playing for, Montreal or whatever. So, yeah, so it was grade 11 French when I decided I no longer really cared about French, and I actually wrote my French final completely in English because I didn't study for it. I barely showed up for class, and it was at that point where I just kind of gave up. Yeah.
That's a Chad move.
Aside from their literature, I don't really care about French either. Right? They got a great sense of, they maximize debauchery. They're great at that, in literature. I mean, great examples of that, from well-known names to not so well-known names. I think half of Daedalus Press's publishing catalog is actually of French authors. I don't know if you've heard of that press, but
it sounds familiar. But like on my end, like I know if you're kind of looking for the more obscure, extreme, even like black metal bands, like Seasons of Mist, the record label, they're based out of France, and they kind of scour the the cobbled roads there to find bands. And I'm pretty sure even the band Gojira actually started out on Seasons of Mist as well, and they are from France. So yeah,
Gojira.
And the French had the Les Légions du Noir, the Black Legions, who it's kind of hard to describe them because a lot of them are very shrouded in mystery. They were said to be like as crazy as like the Norwegians were, except they kept everything like completely under wraps. They would only like record like demo tapes and pass them among a limited number of people. Like one of the tapes is it's basically like an experimental tape that has organ with the sound of someone being tortured over it, and there were rumors that it was actually someone being tortured. But
audio,
yeah, they're pretty fascinating.
Wow.
I feel like for me, like that stuff I find completely fascinating. Like it sounds horrible, like it shouldn't intrigue you, but kind of being in the world of reading and writing horror and loving kind of the the darker metal and the darker stuff like that. Like when you hear that stuff, like that's still what gets me excited is the, like, oh, we passed, or, years ago there was a tape cassette that was passed around. Like now, a lot of times you're just like, okay, like there's a new band, I'll go see if it's on Spotify. And, and usually it is.
The tape trading underground in the 80s got a lot of bands, their start. And yet now it's just this big mishmash of downloading single tracks. The concept album, I hope the concept of the concept album never dies, but people buying, an entire collection of songs in linear format, that I hate to see that go. Because imagine playing The Wall out of sequence.
And I'm still a massive fan of listening to an album over and over and over. And a lot of times, like, as an example for me personally, the most recent At the Gates album, I wasn't a huge fan initially of the audio production. It was more kind of closer to the 80s type stuff. But after half a dozen or a dozen listens of it, the songs themselves kind of take over that production aspect, and you get excited by it, and you kind of put that to the side and you think, wow, like I'm loving I'm loving how this song is put together, and you kind of block out the the kind of tinny or garage metal sound of it. And now a lot of times, pop right now is in a whole just horrible, but pop really goes for that overproduced, really kind of streamlined, everything sounds auto-tuned sound. So I think even for myself being like a big fan of black metal and just heavy metal in general, you still kind of end up wanting that produced sound. So when it comes out and you're like, oh, whoa, like that's not like crystal clear, you kind of have this reaction to it to begin with, where you're like, like, what happened, guys? Did you not have a budget for it? But then when you listen to it a bunch, you're like, oh no, they wanted to go to their roots. They wanted to, really get back to that, like you said, the 80s tape trading mentality.
Yeah.
I recently found a playlist on YouTube. It was called Doomer Music, Suicidal Depressive Black Metal. And like all of that is like extremely fuzzy and very, very lo-fi and all of that, but it really like adds to like the utterly bleak atmosphere of all of it.
I know that were you ever a fan of the band Nevermore?
Yeah, actually, I lived in the Lower Mainland in Abbotsford, down by Vancouver, for over a decade while I was doing university. Yeah. And I had a friend who I was working with when I worked at a pizza place who was a drummer in a band, and he was like, he was all about the Seattle stuff, but not like, nothing wrong with the Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, but he was very much the, Himsa and Wolves in the Throne Room. And he was like, dude, like you need to listen to Nevermore. And so when Nevermore's this Godless Endeavor album came out, that was the first time I heard them. And it was actually one that he forced me to go to the mall and buy on the release day. And the second I heard that album, I became such a fan of them.
So this Godless Endeavor was your first exposure to them?
Yeah, the first exposure that I really know about. Like when I listened to their older stuff, I'm kind of like, I probably heard that at some point, but I didn't have those previous albums until after I bought this Godless Endeavor, and then it was, engulf everything else that they've ever released, and saw them live 2 or 3 times, and just
you did,
like, oh yeah, I saw them on the first time I saw them was on Gigantour with Megadeth. So I saw them there, and then we there's this like this. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you can say anything. It's like,
so there's this absolute shithole of a concert venue in Seattle called El Corazon. And so El Corazon, I don't know if it's still managed by the singer from Himsa, but at one point he was the guy who like essentially booked all of the bands. And so we went down there actually to see the At the Gates reunion show. And so we went there, and when we were there, somebody was like, are you coming to see Nevermore next week? And we were like, what do you mean? They're here next week? And they're like, yeah, they're playing a local show. So we went back the following week, and the tickets were like, I think $7 or $8. And there was
man, that is a steal.
Yeah. People hate it when I say it because we saw at the gates the reunion show for $20. There was, I think, 300 people there. Then we went and saw Nevermore the next week, and then the following week we went back and saw a band who's completely slipping my mind. But one of the openers for that was Book of Black Earth, who's like one of my favorite bands ever. And if you haven't listened to them, definitely give them a listen. But yeah, so went and saw Nevermore there.
That's
and
like
yeah,
that's like peak 2005, 6 like metal.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah. So the crazy thing is like Seattle's a big city, but the music scene there is really small, and especially like near the El Corazon. So the entire time when I was at me and my wife were watching at the gates, there was this dude standing beside me with massive dreadlocks, and he was just windmilling the whole time, and we were high-fiving, and he I personally, I don't drink, but my wife will have some alcohol once in a while. He bought her some drinks. We were hanging out and chatting the whole time. Literally, he's the drummer for Book of Black Earth. I had no idea until we saw them like however many weeks later performing, and there he is sitting behind the drum kit, and I was like, what the hell? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I had no idea, but that's just how it was there. Like, same Vancouver, you would go to Croatian Cultural Center, and you'd be standing in line waiting to get food, and like, Gene Hoglan would be hanging out beside you because they all lived right near there, and Devin Townsend would be kicking around to see everybody. So it's this very like.
Have you met Devin Townsend?
Yeah. Devin's a really nice guy. Yeah.
How many projects has he got going now? Like 7, 8?
I don't know. It's interesting. Like I hate to say it, but I'm somebody who goes on Blabbermouth a lot.
Yeah.
And just because I find like they keep up to date on a lot of different stuff.
Oh.
And yeah, they always have, and because Devin's pretty, commercially known in the metal world, they always have updates for him. So he's got a lot of stuff on the go.
My favorite project of his ever was there was only one album under this moniker, but it was Ocean Machine.
Yes. Yeah.
That is my favorite Townsend record ever.
Yes.
I mean,
just gorgeous.
I sometimes I'll listen to it and it'll depress me a little bit. And I think he was depressed when he recorded it. But other times it's like, wow, man, I'm like tapped into the veins of the human entity or something. It's just amazing.
Yeah, no, like, and I think it's one of those ones where, again, I think now, if you're trying to introduce it to people, if they only like single songs at a time, it just won't connect with them. Versus if there's somebody who's going to sit there and listen to it from start to finish, the second it ends, they're going to start it again.
But what's funny? We were talking about Nevermore. I didn't know that the lead singer had passed until a few months ago. Crazy.
Yeah, I think a couple of years now he's been gone.
I didn't know. I was waiting for the big reunion album or the next Nevermore masterpiece. My first exposure to them was Dreaming Neon Black. That record about the guy whose girlfriend left and joined some cult and he never saw her again. But it was their next record that I still uphold as their best ever, and it was Dead Heart in a Dead World. Every song on that is a 5-star masterpiece of audio.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, just insane stuff.
Believe in Nothing, I mean, that's an anthem in some metal circles now, and to the point that some other band that was newer at the time, back in 2007, covered it, and I don't remember who they were. All Else Fails or something.
Okay, yeah. There's a lot of bands around that year with those type of names.
I know. And I was also big into Mastodon and Ulver at the time. I don't know if you're familiar with Ulver, but
I don't mind Ulver. It's not something that like I actively seek out. And it sounds kind of, I don't know, kind of lame, but I've kind of fallen away from enjoying a lot of Mastodon's stuff. I don't know if it's just like when they came out, like Blood and Thunder and March of the Fire Ants and all that, and you were just like, holy man, like these riffs are huge. And now they seem to be very progressive, and it's not anything bad about the progressiveness, but just where I'm at in my musical headspace. Like it just, I'm like, like, okay, great, there's new Mastodon, but I don't take the time to really dive into it anymore. And it could be really good. It's just not for me right now.
Everything Mastodon does is a concept album, by the way, even now.
Yeah.
So I love that they're that creative, but I don't.
Think the last one I really enjoyed was Crack the Sky. And that one we saw them on that tour with High on Fire and Converge and Death Clock, actually. So that was a neat tour.
How do they pull off Death Clock's live shows? And we're getting to the main your work here in a second.
No worries. So Death Clock was essentially so is the main guy whose name completely is gone for me right now. He was doing
Explosion.
So he was doing the guitar and singing. They had I think it was the bass player and guitar player might have both been from Alice Cooper, and then Gene Hoglan was drumming. But they essentially played behind a giant screen, essentially, and then they just had the Death Clock, the Metalocalypse stuff, kind of projecting.
Cool. I wondered how they pulled that off. There's actually a band or two, a few bands that use autonomous or human robots to basically to play instruments, like Captured by Robots, and there was one other whose name escapes me, but there's actually some people flirting with that whole thing, and I find that fascinating. It's like Chuck E. Cheese for metalheads or something. Yeah. But anyway,
robotic guitar.
Yeah, and by the way, I heard that At the Gates guitarist actually started like a post grunge band at one point.
Okay.
Is that right? Do you know anything about that?
No, like the original, like the one of the twins.
I'm not sure what his name was, but I heard that he started some Soundgarden, type, more heavy metal driven grunge type music. And I guess that was before their reunion. But
yeah, I would definitely check that out, because I really enjoy a lot of what they do. Like, I'm a big fan of The Haunted as well.
Guy, the Met front man, he is fucking crazy when he goes on his rants. I have no idea what he's talking about half the time.
From The Haunted?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter seems to be all over the map.
I might be able to find the name of that side album or grunge project of that guy before we wrap up tonight with this. But let's talk about your work. Now that we kind of broken the ice with the whole heavy metal encyclopedia of the 2000 era. So was Wagon Buddy your first? It was my first exposure to you.
Yeah, Wagon Buddy. It's weird because I in an interview I did recently, and I don't know if it was something more where I kind of looked introspectively, but I think Wagon Buddy was kind of the first thing where anybody at all kind of even noticed that I was really releasing anything. It sounds completely arrogant, because I'm a very small fish in a very big pond. But it was kind of, I don't know if it was I don't know if it was the cover or if it was kind of that synopsis of it being kind of this story about a guy and his imaginary friend that kind of caught people and got them excited for it, or if it was simply the fact that I released that and I released another novella, I think 15 days later, called Yuri. It seemed to be one that a lot of people suddenly were like, oh, hey, like, what's this about? And it's kind of like the little wagon that keeps going. Even today, I think on Twitter, 2 or 3 people tagged me in reviews for it that they had just read it. And I mean, part of it is I've had a couple free ebook promos of it. So that gets some people who may have missed it in the past, picking it up and checking it out. But yeah, Wagon Buddy was originally written as a shorter story for my second collection, Left Hand Path. And while I was doing it, I just kind of realized that, the word count I had for it didn't do it justice. And I had to really just pull it out of that collection and expand upon it and do it, make it its own standalone release, really.
So to sum up, the main character in Wagon Buddy, Scott, he is an abusive home, right? He's in an abusive situation, and this I've imagined the Wagon Buddy with different resemblances at different times, but at one point, I think the initial description is that he's almost like covered in flies or something, right?
Yeah, essentially, when I first kind of created him, he's kind of this. He's a mishmash of a few different kind of classic guys. So I'm not gonna say any of that because I don't want to impact anybody in what they picture. But when I kind of work on him, I always picture him as, like you said, this kind of really tall, almost muscular guy in a big black cloak or a leather jacket who's covered in flies. He's kind of got this long, greasy, gross hair that's matted and rotting skin underneath this old kind of hockey mask type face covering. But the mask he wears, it covers it enough so you can't see it, but it doesn't cover it enough that you can see enough of it that you really don't want to see what's underneath it.
I seem to recall at one point he puts on the mask to placate or reassure Scott, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's cool because he meets up Scott when Scott's like a younger guy, or a younger kid, really, where he's having trouble because his mom's drinking a lot because his dad's left, and the kids at school are really bullying him because of that. So he essentially, Wagon Buddy talks to him from out in the shadows in the backyard, and then he puts it on so that when he steps forward, he doesn't scare Scott to death, essentially.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Ben, you got anything?
No, sir. I'm unfamiliar with your work, so I'm mostly going to just be listening here.
Okay. Unfamiliar, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Surprisingly, Steve, a lot of our regulars on this show actually checked out Window in the Ground based on my recommendation, I guess.
Oh, thank you.
Unfortunately, though, most of them won't be here until later, probably after you've left. So,
yeah.
But they all seem to really connect with it. And I feel like there's a lot more lore and backstory, both story-wise and just writing it with that one more than almost anything else you've done.
Yeah. So, like, so Wagon Buddy actually shows up for maybe like 3 seconds in The Girl Who Hid in the Trees. And part of it was I wanted to kind of put in this Easter egg because in Wagon Buddy itself, he says it a few times where he just kind of leaves and comes back, and Scott's kind of saying, like, I know he does this other stuff, and so there's actually a sequel I have out now to Wagon Buddy called Scott, and in that we actually meet somebody else who has had a lifelong relationship with Wagon Buddy. So in The Girl Who Hid in the Trees, when they're out in this one area and there's this horrendous bonfire happening that the main character kind of stumbles upon, he's actually there kind of as this harbinger of something about to happen. So a few people have asked about whether he's in that or not. So with Wagon Buddy, in a whole, Wagon Buddy's pretty much more, a lot of it was more from kind of personal experience of having been bullied as well as having been a bully myself, and then having grown up kind of in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of times I would have my own imaginary sports leagues and stuff like that to kind of pass the time when nothing was happening.
Crazy. Like, how detailed did you get in your mind with that? I mean,
yeah, pretty. I mean, I've never lost a finger, but it was just one of those things where I was, where I grew up. It's kind of a harder redneck area of the world, and people kind of are lifelong livers of that world, and stuff just kind of happens. So with that one, it was that one was kind of more more kind of personal stuff that I put into that one. So Window in the Ground was definitely, of them, it's one that I spent a lot of time trying to get the as much detail with as little amount of detail as possible into it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to be, completely vague about stuff, but also some sentences kind of opening this whole world for other people that they're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I think it was like in the one email when we were chatting about, something went across the sky that was large enough that its wings kind of blocked out the moon. But that was kind of it. That was like, that's all I kind of gave.
But that's all I needed to put together what we talked about. And
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I want to spill the beans on that, if that's all right, because I only have one person that comes on here that's actually gives a damn about being, hearing spoilers.
Yeah.
All the others seem to be chill with it, and it won't prevent them from, reading things. But anyway, most of them have already read this anyway. Before we kind of spoil this and talk about some of the deeper mechanics of this story, because there are some things that I still think about even now. And this is a pretty short story compared to like Ritual, Communion, Girl Who Hid in the Trees, right? But
Yeah.
for me, it's the most impacting one of what you've written so far.
Thank you.
Basically, how do you set up? I've tried to explain this to people, but basically, it's like how certain like attractions in a park, like a fountain or something, may have a plaque with details, historical details.
Yeah.
This was built here then, well, basically, there's this little road in the backwoods near a park or in a park or something, right? And there's a signs posted saying, stipulating some rules to follow when you go out to this window that's actually looking down in the ground. And you made it basically a what do you call it? Not a monolith, but what's the other word for monument? It's a monument that's kind of whispered about around town. It's not official, but I guess it would be kind of like the Georgia Guidestones, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, so originally when I did the first draft of it, there was a few things that were a little bit different, but for me, it was kind of that idea, that, kind of every small town has this like hidden thing that everybody knows about, but nobody ever talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And again, and a lot of the stuff when I write it, a lot of it comes kind of from where I grew up, and where I grew up, we didn't really have, there was the houses that were the farmhouse that was abandoned for years that you never went by at night because obviously it was haunted. But it always seems like a lot of the locals, they'll always know kind of something. And even when you're a tourist, you'll go there and you'll say something like, "Oh, I want to go eat at like Grandma June's restaurant," and all of them will be like, like, "Are you sure you want to go there?" And like you have no idea because you're not from there. So with this one, that was kind of the emphasis or the basis of it, was that this town kind of, it has this mysterious hidden thing that you don't learn about until you're 18, because that's when they've deemed people to be, responsible enough to kind of follow the rules. And the story kind of picks up on the day that, our main character's grandpa decides, he's had enough of the rules, and the boy needs to see what actually kind of controls and what kind of keeps the town, essentially safe.
And this takes place in like the first 15 years of the 1900s, right?
Possibly.
Well, I mean, it kind of has to take place in like around, say, 1810, 1815, something like that, right? Because you mentioned Sears Roebuck catalog at one point, and those.
Yeah.
I
tried to keep it as like non-year as possible, but obviously, yeah. So he's as a lot of young boys did back in the day. He has the Sears catalog to kind of look at the underwear section, and Grandpa drives him out in his car, that sort of thing. So it does take place kind of, you know, early. When I was doing it, I was thinking more kind of 1950s ish, kind of when the catalogs were coming along.
I
But
feel
at
like
the
there
same
was
time,
something that hinted at, though, that it would be in the first like 15 years of the 20th century. And the moon is mentioned like later on when way much more time has passed. So I don't know. I feel like there may be some confusion as far as the timeline, but that's a nitpick.
yeah. So that's actually part of it, was because I wanted to play with, you know, because at the end we kind of find out, you know, what's actually happening and what this guy's role is, and why he's telling the story.
Mhm.
So I wanted to play with how well his memory was, so that you would think some of the things maybe afterwards, like, was he actually, you know, was he saying what he actually was seeing, or, you know, is his memory kind of going from it? Because I wrote it in kind of this almost sing-songy, you know, old-timey way of, you know, where it starts out and it's like, oh, you know, here I am, and, you know, here's some stuff that's happened to me, and, you know, and I just pictured my grandpa telling me this story sitting out on his front porch, and just kind of being like, you know, like, you're never going to believe what's happened to me in my life, son, but here's what's happened, and then would just kind of tell this story, and at the end of it he would just kind of get up and leave, and you know, just to leave you to be like, what the hell, like, okay, old man, you know. But then, like you said, some of it you're like, well, maybe that did happen, and maybe there was these this coven of you know, kind of lustful women dancing around, trying to conjure things from underneath, and, you know, right as him and his friends show up, that sort of thing. So yeah, I tried to play with the timeline a little bit, but initially when I did it, one of my beta readers, I had a different part in there, and he had said that it completely messed up how it read, so I deleted that part, and I think by deleting it, it did make it flow a little bit nicer.
Have you ever heard of iceberg theory with that Ernest Hemingway kind of, you know, threw out there?
Like the you only see 10%.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it. I feel like there was a lot of iceberg going on right here, and that's another reason I love it, because I can kind of add to it in my own mind, like, you know, what this means and why this didn't work in the story, and, you know, and I mean, I feel like when you do delete certain crucial things, it can have that effect, you know, that allows people to kind of fill whatever they want. But so Grandpa takes, you know, the kid out there to see this window in the ground, but what are the rules? One of them is to not look directly in, right?
Yeah, one of them is now you're gonna put me on the spot about trying to remember what my own rules were. One of them is not to look directly in. You know, women who are on you know, during their that time of the month shouldn't go there. You can't bring any meat. No animals.
Got it right here. Do you mind me sharing this?
Oh no, have at it.
This excerpt here. Okay, I'll just share this, and people can get a look for it themselves. And some of these are kind of weird. Is it showing up? It's not, is it? Okay.
I can't see it.
We'll get it. Here we go. How about now?
Yeah, I see her.
You do? Okay. No one under 18. Never be near it by yourself. Minimum of 2 people at all times. That breaks some of the very protectors rules, doesn't it? Yep. Later on. Maintenance people must shield their eyes and plug their ears. Absolutely no meat. That's kind of a weird one. I don't think you explored what would happen if they brought like a cheeseburger on the property. And under no circumstances would animals or pets be permitted. Well, I mean, what about wildlife? No blood. This includes women during that time. I mean, that should go without saying. No babies. Yeah, because humanity is terribly vulnerable to whatever's you know down there. Never ever look in, never ever touch it. But see, it's kind of here's this awesome fruit tree, in the Garden of Eden, but you must never, eat from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, but that fruit looks so tempting. Uh, so it was inevitable that our protagonist was going to, go back at some point. And his grandfather kind of didn't help with, building and reinforcing all the mystique and the questions around it. You know.
Yeah, and I never really give a reason either as to why Grandpa has just kind of decided, this is the time that this boy should know what's going on. And I think that was part of what some people connected with, was that, it just, sometimes in life you just have that moment where you crack, and that was, for whatever reason, that was Grandpa's moment where he cracked. And I do kind of allude to him knowing that he should have known better, but he kind of just, brings the boy back to his parents and says, this is what I did. I'm sorry, but here you go. And now you deal with it. And then, kind of the dominoes start to fall.
I'm not going to say, all the stuff that, goes on with Grandpa later, but I'll just say that he has a very interesting character arc. I thought that he was just going to be a one and done, Yeah, well, I took him down there. I wanted him to, get some, hair on his, grow some hair on his chest, get a rite of passage thing, and I thought that'd be it. Maybe his parents would deal with him from then on, but there is an interesting reoccurring, development with Grandpa. And you said that it was you pulled back on it a little bit and changed it in the second draft, right?
Yeah. And I mean, part of it was that I didn't want it to just become, I think part of it was I've been working on like ritual and communion in the third part so much as well. And with that one, like, I think I just hit over 400 hours on the dark web on a cult chat room for that stuff. And so I think I got to the point with The Window in the Ground where I didn't want it to become overly gory or graphic for graphics sake, because I felt like with Ritual, like a lot of what happens in there, the stuff that happens in Ritual is very specifically needed, even though some people may find it gratuitous. But as the trilogy plays out, there's reasons for each kind of event. So with The Window in the Ground, it was kind of like, almost like I wanted to write a ballad versus a kind of a headbanger, where it was like, a little bit more relationship based, a little bit more, emotional based, where people are like, when something bad happens, you feel it, versus, yeah, like that happened, like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Actually, someone who won't be here till later actually sent me a question related to what you just said, basically. So I guess you've been pretty much answered it. But does he have a background in occult studies or theology, whether just a casual interest or a formal one? Really interested in the metaphor of this story and how he arrived at its symbols.
Yeah, no formal, so my education, I don't know if do you guys have, you are in the US, right? Sorry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have kinesiologists in the US?
Okay. Now,
yeah. I think I know who you're talking about. Are those the people that like hammer on your foot in order to, or is that, am I thinking of something else?
Kind of. So it's kind of like a physiotherapist light, I guess would be a way to describe it.
Is that where they take like a hammer and like a wooden tool and kind of hammer the tension out of your muscles?
In some parts, yeah. So yeah, I did my university degree in kinesiology, so essentially health sciences. So all of the occult stuff is purely, just from personal interest. But then, yeah, like, with the stuff for ritual and communion and that that was really me kind of going full steam into kind of, the whole world of how does somebody get into a cult. And it just got to the point where I was like, you know what, kind of the saying of, now I can't remember what the saying is, in for an inch, in for a foot, or in for a penny, in for a pound, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was where I was just like, if I want to kind of have something where I felt it kind of realistically portrays what is happening in some of the really dark corners of our online world, that's what I'll do. Versus with this one, we kind of touched on a bit. It's a little bit about that kind of Garden of Eden, kind of, here's the forbidden fruit and kind of what happens from it. But then, like I said, the other part of it really is that small town, there's something there, but nobody's supposed to know about it except for the locals. And then
the problem is everybody knows about it. They just don't talk about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of that unspoken, and also that the fact of like, this is a younger kid who's not supposed to know about it for, almost another 5 years, and his grandpa just, gets fed up and says, "Here you go, boy. Like, I'm throwing you to the wolves, and best of luck with what happens, but I can't have this on my conscience anymore." And
it infects the visitors with a sense of urgency, just like the main character has to, He can't wait to tell his friend and say, "Look, we got to go back there, man. You won't believe what's down there." It kind of infects people with a need to go back. Almost, they achieve some sort of euphoria from being there, even though it's terrifying. And even before you even get there, it starts working on your, mind, just walking on the path to it. So,
and then that's with him, like, with the one rule of, you always have to be there with somebody else, because he goes back with his friend. And then they got to go there with the two girls, and so it's kind of like that. There's always this kind of building of, from him being shown something he shouldn't have seen. The ending, we get to the point where almost the entire town is there.
But I like how you played that up. It's very, like a more 20th century Crucible, or with the villagers kind of taking up torches and pitchforks kind of for, shall we say, punishment or justice, like vigilante justice for a certain someone. The thing
at one,
go
sorry, I was gonna say, at one point I actually had, I think it was about 5 or 6 rules written down as to what would happen if those rules were broken. And I thought that kind of really, again, kind of forced, definitions on the reader, where
that would be too much.
So I kind of still use those as I progress with it, because there's the one point where the sheriff and the mayor show up, and they're kind of deciding what they should do and that sort of thing. And so I kind of had this backlist of rules that I could look at it and kind of get an idea of what would happen if they were broken, instead of just being like, well, whatever happens can happen, because there's no fixed rules of nature for these people. So I wanted it to still kind of have that, that grounded in reality, as ridiculous as that sounds when you talk about a story like this, but that, these are the rules, and if these rules get broken, this is what happens. But then I decided not to share that side of it, because again, like you said, it would just essentially, you would read them and you'd be like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen, and you'd be done.
Yeah, there is a very good, interesting, like almost cosmic horror, orchid that kind of unfolds at the end. I use that term metaphorically. There's a cosmic horror occurrence that takes place towards the end. A kind of a turning of the wheel. Recurring theme, and I loved that part of it. The things that are down there in the wind, past the window in the ground, they are apparently allowed to come up for so long for certain reasons. And I don't think you ever specified why or how, but I kind of got a sense of, like, I don't know, Charon Charon in Greek, mythology, kind of rowing
Yeah.
to their final destination. That kind of vibe is what I got from when they are actually allowed to come out.
Yeah, and also the idea that, and I kind of say it at the end because I can never remember what it's called. You know, when you tell a story and it's like from letters, is it epistolary?
Yeah,
Epistolary?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I absolutely hate that type of storytelling. So I wanted to write something that was like that, but not like that.
It's good for supplemental, reasons, but an entire novel written like that, it feels like I'm looking through someone's mail.
Yeah. So at the very end, we kind of get the wrap up of what's about to happen or kind of where we're at. And our main character kind of offhandedly says, he kind of keeps them from coming up, but then part of it is maybe they're not actually trying to get up, maybe they're trying to get away from something worse below. So it was kind of that almost that illusion of there's always these layers that we can't see in these small towns, and something even bigger is kind of trying to bubble up and make its way to the top of everything.
That's the thing. Did you ever read comic books growing up at any point?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, so you had Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, right?
Yeah.
And Thanos of Titan, the Mad Titan, who is in love with the physical personification of death, right? But above them, you have the Beyonder and the Celestials, and there's even a food chain with these cosmic, nearly all-powerful beings.
Yeah.
And there's someone, the one above all is even stronger than the Beyonders and the Celestial. And so imagine all the things that are down there that are more powerful than those things at the subsurface level. And maybe as you get deeper and deeper, it's like it's an even rawer form of evil down there, and it's probably some version of hell. But I mean,
yeah, and that's like, and essentially our character gets to the point of he doesn't really care anymore because he knows what's about to come. He can feel things changing and stuff happening like that. So he's not really. He's kind of philosophizing about like this maybe is what's going to happen, but I don't honestly care too much because I don't have much time left. But the one thing I did do, and this may upset some people who really like this, but I have a kids book that I wrote. I wrote it with my nieces and nephews called "The Boy Whose Room Was Outside," and there's a moment in there where the idea of that book is this boy goes to sleep and instead of going into his dreams or just going to sleep, he goes to sleep and then he immediately wakes up in this kind of magical forest. So he's kind of worried because he doesn't think his parents will believe him or anything like that. And then as the story goes on, he's looking around in the basement and he finds one of his mom's old journals. And in one of her old journals, she talks about herself going to this magical place. So he kind of brings it up with her, and she's like, well, let me bring you to the place of magic for where I grew up. And so she actually takes him to the window in the ground. And so they replicate the drive that Grandpa and our main character did. They go out of town. They pass this old signpost that has, there's rules on it, but they're all faded over the years. And they walk up the hill and they come to this area, and the grass is kind of overgrown, and there's this mound out in this clearing, and there's like steel fencing all around it that's protecting anybody from going in there, but it's kind of crumbled in on itself. So with that book, I kind of alluded to that the events from The Window in the Ground precipitated that town's destruction, because they drive out to this place and there's just kind of this town that's not really has any inhabitants anymore and this stuff. So for me, I kind of tried to give it a bit of an extra closure, but also a tie-in, so that if a young reader read this book, they would be curious about this window in the ground that the boy and the mom go to, and then hopefully then they would look into this other book when they were of age to read it.
I love that whole thing of like universal unity when authors do that. It's becoming more commonplace and I think it should be common practice. Really, I hate it when people write like several different iterations of an apocalypse story where people somehow continue surviving, and it's like, well, this apocalypse couldn't happen beside this apocalypse. For some reason, that sends me off in a spiral of fury in my brain, trying to believe.
Yeah.
I like the concept of plot, or author, authorial, story unity. So you've got the Castle Rock thing going on. I appreciate that. One is loosely tied to the other, and Stephen King made a career out of doing that. I think
Absolutely.
Robert McCammon and Dean Koontz may have flirted with that approach as well. I can think of several others that have, including Brian Keene. You've probably come across Brian Keene at this point in your career, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Keene uses it even more than Stephen King does. But so what is The Girl Who Hid in the Trees? Because I think that's the only one that I haven't had any exposure to yet.
So The Girl Who Hid in the Trees is kind of a folklore coming of age story where essentially something kind of is haunting McConnell's forest, and it opens up kind of with an event, many years ago, and then flash forward a little bit, and this young guy, he's really excited because he's going to be playing with his brother later on, but his brother and his friends, they want to go say that they've went out into the forest and kind of survived it, but then of course they never come back. And so the main part of the story is, the younger brother and some of his friends deciding they're going to go out to McConnell's forest and kind of prove what's happened and find out what's happened to his brother and his brother's friends. But of course, as always, when they go out there, there's something actually out there waiting for them, and things kind of get brutalized after.
Cool. Ritual and Communion, are those like the longest you've written so far?
No, I have 3 novels out. I'll say 3. I have Invisible, Piece of Me. Oh, and The Stranger. The Stranger would be the other novel I have. And then Piece of Me is a kind of a dark, I think they call it grimdark, where it's it's horror-ish, but there's a lot of kind of fantasy elements to it. It's all set in a world filled with snow, and it's essentially about a woman whose husband and son go out for the hunt to kind of pad their food stores for the winter, and they don't come back, and so it's her, kind of year after year hoping that they come back. And then after about a decade, she randomly spots somebody out in the wilderness, and he says that her family's still alive. And so then the two of them decide to go find them.
Cool. So yeah, you've been more prolific than I originally was led to believe.
Yeah, I have a number of stuff out, honestly.
And you've contributed to anthologies. What is Yuri? I just bought that a few days ago.
So Yuri is a so Yuri was the one, as well as Wagon Buddy, that was written to be in the one collection together. But Yuri is essentially a story set in kind of snowy, dark Russia wilderness, where the son of a farmer, Yuri, begrudgingly takes a job at the mines owned by the richest man in the country. And when he gets there, he finds out that kind of the house that he's living in isn't exactly what he thought it would be. And I call it my twisted haunted house story, because it's kind of a revenge type story, but also a ghost type story. It's one that I think, for whatever reason, I think because I released it right around the time of Wagon Buddy, it it got overlooked a bit, but it seems to be getting some love recently as well.
Talking about haunted house novels, have you read Maynard's House from I think it was written in the 70s or 80s, maybe? I don't know. It's based right after Vietnam. You ever read that?
No.
I recommend that to people when they talk about haunted house novels. I almost feel like there's nothing left to explore with haunted house novels, but I mean, a few people have proven me wrong on that. Like what God of Hungry Walls by Garrett Cook was pretty good. Maynard's House by Herman Rocker, and House Without a Summer, which I kind of read on and off. I come back to it. That one's pretty interesting. The House That Fell from the Sky. So there's a few, but I mean, a lot of them tread that Amityville thing, you know, almost, you know, fitting the mold instead of breaking it. There's only so many ways you can, you know, rearrange and shuffle the family, you know, unit around to be unique, you know. But
yeah, so hopefully I don't tread any of those familiar tropes, because I tried to set this one up quite differently. So hopefully that'll kind of tick those boxes for you.
I feel like you have unfinished business with the the window in the ground, because, well, I know a lot of pagan kids or whatever, or just drunken, you know, kids in their drunken revelry will party around this thing at night, kind of like our local legend. People go through the Sensabaugh Tunnel and they'll turn off the car in the middle of the tunnel to scare their dates, you know, and you've heard of the story of the I think a few different places have this legend, so it's kind of been copied over and over, but it's clearly bullshit. But, you know, supposedly if you stop on a certain hill, you know, it will go upward because of some gravity anomaly. Yeah. You'll see kids' handprints on the back window, like they were pushing it. You've heard that, right?
Yeah, we had one. We had one near where I grew up that was kind of different, but so near where I grew up, there was a roadway called the Monashee, and in the wintertime it was a horrible road, and you know, many people have lost their lives there. But there's been some really bad accidents where people had survived it, and so the kind of story that goes there is that these people who ended up living right before they got into the accident, they would see essentially some form of death standing on the side of the road, and that's what saved them, because they either hit the brakes or they did something that didn't that allowed their vehicle to, you know, hit in a different fashion or whatever. So there's this little stretch of road where kind of when you come around the corner, you're supposed to look off to the left, and if you see death standing there, you know you're about to be in an accident, but you'll live. So I don't know what happens if what you see for those people who passed away, but that's kind of the legend we have in the one spot was, you know, so every time I come around this corner, I never want to look off to the left, because you don't want to see somebody standing there. But then there's that part of you that thinks, well, what if I don't look? And if I would have looked, I would survive or whatever, right? So it's one of those, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, almost.
A superstition goes a long way towards, you know, contributes to the growth of this lore until the lore takes on a life of its own. It's fascinating, you know, and to the point where it's enough for me that it's a concept that's out there that exists. And so for me, it exists because it's, you know, somebody put in several generations, put enough time into, you know, making it their own. And so to me, it's, you know, an organic living thing in that sense anyway. And what would life be without those little local town legends, you know? And so you are at your best when you are, you know, working with that kind of clay, molding that kind of clay.
Yeah.
But what's your latest? Is it Scott, the Wagon Buddy Tale?
So Scott, Wagon Buddy Tale came out, but that came out right about the same time as Of Witches, which was the collection of eight stories based all around kind of witch mythology and stuff like that. And the Of Witches one was interesting because I had this idea of wanting to write a collection based completely on witches, but I also didn't want to. I didn't want to be seen as, you know, oh, another white guy writing stories about, you know, women protagonists or antagonists or however they're going to be seen. So I wrote them, and then I reached out to a few of my you know, beta readers slash also, you know, to a degree sensitive readers, and said, is there anything I should change in these, or if somebody reads them, are they going to be fine with how they're portrayed? And you know, all of them came back and said, no, this is great, because a lot of times, you know, witches are either made out to be you know, kind of the Disney witch, where, you know, things you know, they're there to make things better. But I had such a mix of them. I think that's what worked for this collection was, you know, you kind of get a siren style witch, and you get, you know, the witches who are there just to rip your innards out and that sort of thing. So those two would be my most recent. And then in the start of the year, I'm hoping to get the finale of the Father of Lives trilogy done. I have it almost completely done. I say that meaning that I had logged off of the dark web chat, and I decided not to go back just after what was happening on there. And then I went back on there because I was bored and I saw some cool stuff. And so I wanted to kind of, you know, adjust or tweak the ending of it to kind of match what had happened with one of my mentors on there.
So the Father of Lies trilogy is Ritual and Communion, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't released the cover or the title for the last one yet.
Okay. You don't want to break that here tonight? You want to hold on to it?
I'll hold on to it for now. Yeah.
Okay. If you need one more beta reader, I'd love to, you know, contribute to the process in any way I can, because I feel like you're progressing with your craft, and an above average talent. There is a sea of horror authors out there, and they all think they're Stephen King, right? I mean, let's admit it. I mean, locally, their peers and family and whatnot, they'll say they think in their minds, because they're not dealing with it every day, that, you know, yeah, my son or cousin is just like Stephen King, and they let them be proud about that, you know, even though you know that it's much deeper. It goes much. It's not that simple, you know. But I do feel that's why I say, when I say you're above average, you know, with what you're doing, I like it. I think that you're able to hide your faults well and maximize your strengths. And that's what a good author do, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying I know what your weaknesses are, but, you know, all authors have them, right? So.
No, and I think the two keys for that is, like, I've never once written something that I wouldn't want to write or read.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, my kind of editor and copy editor and stuff, who's David Sodergren, he's not a yes guy. So for when I send my stuff to him to start getting ready for release, if there's something in there that he is like, no, this does not work, he doesn't sugarcoat it. He just says, you know, like, this sucks, you need to change it. Or, you know, he'll say, like, really, like, you've released how many books and this is how you describe something? Like, you're better than that. So it's good, because he's not he's not a yes guy at all, and that makes a world of difference for it, right?
Is he an author too? Or just an
David's probably one of the, I would say, the best of the indie authors out there, at least in my opinion. David has 4 books out now, and just stunning stuff, and you know, just such a storyteller. And I think part of the big thing for him is that he watches a lot of movies, and I think because of that, it comes across really, really in the way that he's writing, like, very cinematographically. I don't think that's a word. But
Cinematic.
Yeah. So me and him actually have a book together that'll be out next year at some point. His stuff is fantastic.
And you don't want to say the title for that either right now?
We haven't confirmed it. We have it kind of I would say we have it 95%ish. It is a horror western. Not really in the splatterpunk stuff that we're seeing a kind of a resurgence of right now, or a push of right now. But yeah, it is a horror western. The kind of the central theme of it is revenge and trying to deal with what's happened to a loved one. So
Joseph Pulver, right? You knew of him, right?
that name sounds very familiar.
Orphan Palace. He wrote Orphan Palace and a shitload of other, cosmic horror type stories. Well, he died earlier this year, and but he wrote a horror western exclusively for one of Dynatox Ministries imprints. I think. What you know the name of that little imprint? Then.
I can think of a couple of the imprint names. I don't know what that specific one was.
The one that deals with all the Lovecraftian type stuff.
I want to say I think that's something like Xenobos or something like that.
I don't know, man.
That might have just been the name of the. I think it was like Dunhouse or something like that.
Yes, Dunhouse Manor. Yes, thank you. But anyway, so Joseph Pulver wrote a horror western too. So this is like people are really liking horror in a western setting because it was never explored for so long. It was dominated by the gunslingers that were totally mortal and played totally straight. No supernatural stuff unless it was like God or an angel intervening to save the good guy, something like that. Other than that, you never see supernatural stuff. What?
I kind of wonder if the popularity of Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian was an influence on that. There's nothing explicitly supernatural in that, but it's sort of implied that the character of Judge Holden may be supernatural.
Really? That's interesting. I haven't read it. Are you familiar with McCarthy? Have you read any of his shit?
I've read The Road, and I read one other one like many years ago before The Road, and I honestly can't remember the name of it. I like McCarthy stuff, but sometimes reading it, I feel like I'm just not smart enough of a reader to enjoy it all the time. So for his stuff, a lot of times I really have to, kind of take my time reading it versus a lot of other stuff. I can really fly through it because I really, it's not that it's dumbed down or anything like that. It's just, McCarthy really tries to make every single word have as many meanings as possible.
See, that must be a maddening existence to work so long. Imagine how long it takes to craft a sentence with that kind of, oomph to it. That's like a flower unfurling, in real time or something. Imagine how much that must be a tortured existence to spend the time on a regular sentence during the day. We'll write out, an entire 5 or 6 chapters or 5,000 words or something, and this poor guy is sitting here like, no, it has to be perfect.
It'd be interesting to see kind of how he works with his editor. Is it something where he's more in charge and in the lead of how things will go, or if he's really open to suggestion and does he send them the manuscript and they go through it with a red pen and send stuff back and then he takes that, or is it just this is how it is and make sure I have no spelling mistakes and get it out there, or how it works?
Yeah, and what's fascinating, this used to happen a lot more in the old days with the traditional publishing model, but a lot of times authors would have the book just taken away from them, before they were even finished, if it took too long to redraft it, or they just kept on, and it was like, no, it's my masterpiece, it's my magnum opus, me with it finished. But then publishers dude, we got to sell it eventually.
And I may be wrong with this, but I think that was one of the reasons, or that was one of the rumors I heard as to why James Patterson started using so many ghostwriters, was because it's something, and again, I could be completely wrong, but like I think almost 3/4 of the stuff he releases now is written with a ghostwriter.
Oh,
And for the most part, they don't get the credit for it. So it's rare to see something of his where it says, James Patterson with, or and versus usually just says James Patterson. But I know somebody on Twitter had actually had a thread about it, and they get paid like $5,000 to write a James Patterson novel, and it goes out and they get no rights from it or anything. It just poof out it goes under James Patterson. It's an international bestseller because it's got his name on it. And I think that was one of the reasons why he ended up doing that, was because he was getting to the point of needing to release so many books. He just didn't have the time to do it. And there was such an interest for it. It just, he ended up getting the ghostwriters and his editors, it worked for them. So.
yeah. All right. So here's one of the people I mentioned who have actually read Window in the Ground. And luckily they're here to talk to you. I was about to wrap up, but Regina, if you have anything to ask Steve, it's been a fascinating discussion. Really one of the better ones, I think, to me.
Hey, Regina.
Hey, Steve, man, I loved Window in the Ground. It was really a great, I found a very occult metaphor. And I was wondering right out of the gate, do you have a background in occultism or theology or anything like that? No?
No. Yeah. And we talked about it briefly before, but where I grew up, like we probably from, I would say 7 until maybe 10 or 11, we were kind of forced to go to Sunday school on Sundays.
Mm-hmm,
And that was kind of like, everybody went to Sunday school, and then, you sang in the Christmas choir and that sort of stuff. But that was about the extent of my like religious experience growing up. But everything else from that's really been more kind of on my own kind of interest.
Right.
And it's funny because I can actually pinpoint the exact time I started to really get into it. And do you guys had Columbia House, right? The record, like you'd send in.
Yeah.
Like the you get 10 CDs for a cent or whatever.
The scam.
So that's where I got most of my music from. And one of the ones I got was a Ministry album. And in the artwork they had, I can't remember what it was, but in one of them they had this artwork for this book. And in the town that I grew up, they had like a drugstore that had one of those like wheel like turning turnstile bookcase thingies.
Right.
And I saw this novel on there, and the novel was essentially this girl's recollection of her growing up, where her family had essentially been worshiping Satan with all of these people in the town. And I've looked for the book again, but I don't know if I bought the book or if I shoplifted the book, but I ended up with the book. And I used to read it on the school bus going into school every day. And I had it hidden in a different book. And I was just like, I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I was just like, I want to know everything about this. Like, why does this family have like a stone slab in the basement where they tie their teenage daughter up, naked to perform these rituals on her? And, why does the minister from the church come and oversee these when during the day he's the minister of the church? So that was that moment where I was like, all right, like I want to know everything that's ever been dark before.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Sounds like it was a good book. You're gonna have to, if you think about that title, you're gonna have to send it to me on Goodreads or something.
I actually tracked it down a while ago, and from what I gather, and I can't actually remember the name of it, but from what I gather, it's been like wildly discredited that like she had made up a lot of this stuff.
It's one of those like repressed memory type things.
Was it written by Beatrice Sparks? I think her name was.
I can't remember.
The girl who wrote Go Ask the woman who wrote Go Ask Alice.
Oh God.
So Satanic Panic?
No, it wasn't that. But I just remember, and like, but now like a part of me is also like, was it discredited because it was real and I'm totally thinking this conspiracy theory wise or what? So
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, no, it sounds like I can definitely see how that kind of influenced your interest in fiction and this book in particular. Definitely. Which again, I like just from like a mechanical standpoint, I both really liked the style and the pacing. I thought was like it was really clean, really just tight. Do you have I'm probably asking questions that have been asked already, so I'll probably stop. But I mean, I can tell this is not your first rodeo, right? You've probably written quite a few short stories at least before.
yeah, I think The Window in the Ground is my 9th novella out.
Okay. Yeah, I saw you had quite a few. I just wasn't sure of the chronology. Yeah, man, I loved it. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get in earlier because it was a really great book and I want to ask questions, but I'm sure anything I want to ask has been asked already. So
And by all means, if anything else comes up, feel free to message me.
Will do,
Gregor is also here now, and he also read Window in the Ground. Gregor, you got any questions for Steve? We're probably about to wrap up soon, but I'm pleased that everyone who has read it was able to get something in. What do you got to ask him?
I mean, I don't know what has been covered. I mean, the only thing I could really say is that I enjoyed the book, and I would definitely pick up another one. Now, it seemed as if, from looking at other titles that you have out there, this might be a departure from the usual stuff that you put out, and this was a little bit different and inspired in a different fashion than your other work. Is that correct?
I would say kind of. All of my stuff is typically more in the kind of the darker realm of stuff. This one, the way this one is written is I would say quite different from the other ones. Saying that, I would think the closest one to this one in terms of feel would be Wagon Buddy, and then the sequel, Scott, a Wagon Buddy Tale, that came out a couple months back.
Okay.
And I think part of it is just the more kind of the less visceral approach to it versus all of the other stuff has some pretty brutal, gory aspects to it. Although Wagon Buddy does have some gore to it. I mean, I guess even The Window in the Ground does a little bit as well, but not to the same extent.
Right.
It seems like your other stuff was a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it, maybe conventional, maybe splatter punk kind of stuff, or extreme horror, and this one seems
I would say Ritual and Communion for sure.
yeah.
But then as an example, the novel Piece of Me, that's more like grimdark fantasy stuff about a woman trying to survive in a winter wilderness. And even like Yuri wouldn't be I wouldn't call that very splatter punky, although like The Girl in the Trees might be more in the splatter punk realm.
Yeah, because it seemed like when the premise was different than at least what I was able to glean from the synopses of the other books that you have out. Like, it seemed like this was more of a novel premise. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
The way it's kind of been described, it sort of reminds me of The Cipher by Kathy Koja. Was that an influence at all?
I actually haven't read that yet. I have it on my Kindle to read. It's just been one of those ones where everyone tells me to read it, and I just haven't got to it yet. And I've had a few people who've said, reading what you wrote here, I think you would really like that one. So I do need to get to that one sooner than later.
Are you more of a Kindle or physical copy guy? Because that's a big difference. Authors vary on that.
Yeah, for me personally, I'm 100% Kindle.
Me too.
Yeah, simply because like I read a lot, and but I also still co-sleep with my son, so I couldn't keep a light on. I couldn't. It was tough to flip a book page when you have one hand and the other hand he is has it wrapped up in his arms and stuff like that. So up until he was born, I was 100% physical, and I was even like, like Kindle, like what an abomination to like, the sanctity of the written word. And then it was like he arrived, and I was like, well, how the hell am I going to keep reading anymore?
Right.
And Phoenix, another of our regulars, has joined now. Glad to see everybody popping in now that we're an hour or so in. Phoenix, I know you don't generally give yourself over to horror. You're more about like almost the metaphysical plane of human, mundane existence, right? I guess to describe where your head's at, right?
Well, no, I would say that I'm very much influenced by speculative fiction, which does include some horror. But I generally more read either literary fiction, fantasy, philosophy. I haven't read as much horror.
You got anything for Steve? He's very much repping horror tonight. Anything you want to discuss? We're probably going to let him go here. I've interrogated him enough. But
Well, I always like asking writers like what their process is. So, yeah, I'm curious what your process is for writing your books.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit different than a lot of them. Saying that, I mean, this may be exactly how some people do, but I typically write the entire first draft mentally.
Okay.
I don't know if it's just like I come from an athletic background where we did like a lot of visualization for stuff, and for me it was kind of that carryover of, this is how the story is going to go from A to B to C to D. I don't typically like physically outline stuff. Like I don't write down what's going to happen or anything like that, because I have it all kind of completely done in my head. And then I'll typically barf out the first draft where it's just almost like a sprint. A lot of times my first drafts, I'll typically get done within about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I'll just let them sit there for a couple months while I work on the next thing. And then when I get kind of closer to finishing, book number 2 or whatever I'm working on, I'll then go back and do a rewrite or a reread and a tweak. And then I'll send it out to some beta readers and then off to my editor, and then essentially get it prepped for release. So at this point, because this is going to be, this will be year 6 of doing this, I guess. It's almost formulaic in a sense, where I know how long it'll take me to go from, when I first start writing something to when it'll actually be released.
Yeah. Well, and I saw that, I think it was this book specifically, The Window in the Ground. You described that as coming of age horror.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of has their own definition of coming of age. It seems to be standard that if it features a younger or teenage main character who then has to go through something, that essentially kind of describes coming of age now. I guess it falls into that category. I mean, for me, it was more of a story of a small town with a secret, kind of with that mix of the Garden of Eden premise of here's this amazing thing, but you can never touch it.
Yeah, I didn't really think of it as coming of age horror when I was reading it. Did you think so, or did anybody else on this show think so? It didn't really have a coming of age vibe to me.
To me, it was more like coming of age when you're extremely traumatized, and the trauma itself is your coming of age experience, kind of. And you just are like then coping with that for the rest of your life, basically, and inflicting it on others. And
see, he has a very unorthodox life after that initial experience of the story, and so for it to be an actual legitimate Bildungsroman, as the literary elites call it. I think he would have had to have broken away and had other experiences, but unfortunately, he was robbed of the.
Without spoiling it, you kind of have to come through on the other side. I don't know. It just seems like I don't know. Not to disparage the book in any way. I don't think it was like, oh, he was trying to write a coming of age and he failed. I don't really think that you were even trying to really write a coming of age story with this. Were you, Steve?
He's gone.
Okay,
Oh.
so yeah,
Okay.
now,
He's back.
Okay.
Back. Yeah, but you weren't really trying to write a coming of age book with this particular story, were you? I mean, it didn't seem like it to me.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I didn't think so. It didn't read like one to me. It seemed like more like you were saying, a small town with a secret, dark secret, and that type of thing. You know, I really enjoyed the premise. It was a great premise. I also really like the short chapters. Are you generally a short chapter guy, or is this an exception to the rule?
No, I'm 100% short chapters. Yeah,
Love it.
again, I think it's just the way my brain functions, but I
Right.
struggle. I really struggle to write. You know, like sometimes, like if I'm reading my Kindle and I'll finish a chapter and I see the next chapter and it says like 25 minutes left in the chapter, I'm just like, how the hell did this writer do that? Like,
Oh yeah,
are you
Yeah.
kidding me? Like, this is as long as some of my books, you know, like it's just, yeah. I've always been more of the shorter chapter stuff. And again, I think that's just the way I process it when I'm writing stuff.
all right.
who do you
I
prefer?
wanted.
Oh, go ahead, Phoenix.
Oh,
I prefer
just-
short chapters. If that was your question, Jeremy, what was it? What was it?
Yeah, I think I do too.
Yeah.
Basically, that's what I was. Yeah, what were you going to say, Phoenix?
So I did want to make a distinction, just that, there might be like an elitism to the idea of buildings Roman, but I mean, even if you take like something like Catcher in the Rye, there isn't really resolution in that book with the character, but it's still considered coming of age. So kind of my idea is the way that you can capture, you could have like personal growth, like be one of the main things you emphasize, but I could actually see coming of age being interesting in horror, because sometimes you end up feeling, I mean, I haven't read the book, but if the idea is that he went through something traumatic, or this character went through something traumatic, that maybe that wasn't necessarily needing to be resolved. Maybe that's part of the point, especially if you're capturing something like trauma, and that definitely fits in the context of horror.
There you have it.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely you can have coming of age, horror, right? There's plenty of examples of that, but I just don't think this. I personally don't think that this fits that particular genre. Not to say
It's
that.
what happens to him, that kind of launches it into a whole different realm. And I love,
Right.
it's hard to not give away the conceit of what was going to initially happen in the first run through, Steve, that you told me off air, and then what it became later. I'm fascinated by that, but I am kind of worried about spoiling the whole thing based on what we've already said about it.
Right.
I usually don't care about spoilers unless someone present does, but I do feel like there's one thing that was enough of a surprise to me while reading it that I wouldn't want to rob someone else of it. So, but let's just say the last few pages kind of made my imagination soar more than the rest of the story did. Just
Yeah. And like I said earlier, we just kind of get to that point with this character where you can just tell he's given up at the end. He's just, he sees the inevitable, changes that are happening and what's about to occur. And like I said, I hate epistolary.
epistolary.
Yeah. I hate that type of storytelling. So this was my attempt to do something like that, but not to do something like that where, you kind of read about this guy's life as he's telling it to you, but it's not specifically, January 1st, 2009, this happens. So when we get to the end, I kind of wanted it to just be wow, he's really given up and here's why type of a thing.
That to me seems like such a powerful theme, though, because I think often in books, we're expected to have an arc, and those arcs are valuable depending on the story you're telling. But to have have actually a character defeated by that is really interesting to me.
Yeah, so the story is really good. I think Phoenix, this is something that you would actually probably like. I mean,
The window in the ground. Yeah, no, I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah. I mean, it falls roughly into the horror genre, but I wouldn't even consider it to be genuinely something that most people would consider to be horror. I could see it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I mean,
You know.
I call all my stuff more dark fiction because
Yeah.
again, I try to blur that realm of or blur that line of genre stuff. But I've had a
Right.
few people who have said, like, this isn't really a horror story, so I don't really know if I like it that much. And it's like, okay, well, sorry, it wasn't just blood and guts.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's like maybe dark fantasy, maybe, it kind of. I mean, it has a lot of, I mean, there's a strong, like somewhat surrealistic element to it. I think that you would enjoy, Phoenix.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I hear the term grimdark thrown about a lot now, and you dropped it earlier in what you were talking about. So does that apply to like really, really dark fantasy, or
Yeah.
can that apply to modern stuff too?
I think it's primarily for super dark fantasy, like with gritty realism mixed in with your medieval high fantasy stuff, right? I mean, that's kind of what that term has been coined for, I think.
Yeah, it originally came, I think, just kind of generally to describe this phenomena in adaptations of superhero movies, or also like The Dark Knight Returns, just as a comic book, because like it just took Batman to like a totally dark place, and I think
I'd never heard
it
used in that term. I've only heard it used to describe like the Joe Abercrombie type of fantasy novels,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
I think
I've
it
heard
kind
it
of
used for
split
fan
out to
fiction
those.
too.
For
Oh
what?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's like
Fan
for edgy
fiction.
stuff.
Okay. Well, anybody else have anything for Steve? I think you gave us a good hour and a half, and I would love to be a beta reader for whatever you got coming next if you ever need one more. So,
For sure, yep.
okay.
Yeah,
So
I got a bunch
email's
on the
in
go here, so I'll email you.
my email's in the private chat there. And yeah, Phoenix, you were going to say something before
So I got to listen to a little bit of the podcast earlier, but I had missed the context of you were talking about metal, like metal music.
Oh, we talked a lot about metal.
Okay, yeah, I need to check that out then. That's pretty cool.
Well, let's see. What was it? You said you met the guy from what was it? Book of Black Earth.
I've met quite a few actually, but yeah, the drummer from Book of Black Earth was the one that I think we specifically talked about.
Yeah, I just wondered because does metal influence your style of writing at all? Like the themes in metal or the style or anything?
To a degree, it's more that I use the music to kind of drive the atmosphere I'm looking for. So,
Okay.
As an example, for the third book in the one trilogy I'm working on, the only thing I've really listened to while working on it has been music from Dimmu Borgir, which is an Norwegian black metal band. And then I have a kind of a secret-y project that I'm working on right now, and I've only been listening to Arcade Fire while working on that. So a lot of times it's just more kind of looking for music for me that fits that atmosphere that I need to kind of create. So it kind of drives where I want to go with each scene, I guess would be a way of saying it.
How about Acid Bath? You ever listen to them?
Years ago, yeah. Again, that's a band that I really need to be in a specific mood to listen to.
Well, what do you prefer, When the Kite String Pops or Pagan Terrorism Tactics?
I honestly couldn't even tell you right now. Yeah.
For me, it's the Kite String Pops. But man, they actually did some acoustic stuff when they were in that doing that music. That was better than a lot of folk. It was just dark folk, like grim dark folk music or something.
Yeah,
but really wicked lyrics, huh?
Scream of the Butterfly is easily my
Exactly.
favorite track off that album.
That's what I'm thinking of. That and Bones of Baby Dolls. Anyway, yeah, I'm getting all nostalgic. Steve, it's been a pleasure, man. And if you ever want to come back for any reason, even to talk about somebody else or talk about some other subject or rant about something that's bothering you, you could be as regular here as you want, or you can just come to plug your shit, whatever.
Sounds good. Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and I'm glad we got this to work.
And seriously, I talk to a lot of authors, and their talents vary, but I definitely believe that you are above average. So keep up the
Thank
good
you.
work.
It's very kind. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a good night, buddy.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah,
Don't be a
nice
stranger.
chatting with you guys.
Nice
Yeah,
talking.
thanks for
Nice
coming.
meeting you. Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Have a good night.
you too.
Everybody go read Window in the Ground. It's not expensive, and you could probably read it in 1 or 2 sittings. So
Yeah, you could probably read it in a sitting, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I was really invested in what was going to happen.
Yeah, those short chapters kept me going. I mean, I think I read it in 2 sittings, something like that. But yeah, it was really good.
What's going on with everybody?
Phew. Not much, brother.
Um,
Just working.
Yeah, just writing.
Yep.
Do you work from home too, Regina?
Yeah, I work. My writing is my work, so it's great. I write full time and probably about 4 to 6 hours a day on the average day, I would say. And yeah, it's great. Then the other days I just do covers and editing and typesetting and shit like that. Marketing.
You do cover art?
Yeah, I do my own covers. So it's it's a process. I think they come out really well, and I'm pretty proud of them at this point. It's every cover I learn more and more. So
You did Babysitter Bloodbath then, right?
no, that's the one. I did not do that one, and I don't do any of my paperback covers. So the Dottie for You Season 1 collection, which is available for pre-order on Amazon, coming out February 14th, readers, is a beautiful cover by a lovely artist named Lauren K. Kolasinskas, I think is her last name. Love her work. It's very from kind of Harvey Pecker influenced with a touch of Joe Coleman, if anybody knows who that is. Cool stuff, really psychedelic and fun.
I think I know who you're talking about. Didn't Joe Coleman do the cover art for Apocalypse Culture?
Yes, he did. I love those books, and yes, he did.
Yeah. I've only read the first one, but that one is a pretty awesome book.
Yeah, they're awesome. I love those books. The second one, I have been looking all over this godforsaken house for my copy of the first one. I know where the second one is, but the first one is just MIA, man. I gotta try to get a new one, I think. But God, those books are so interesting, so messed up. But yeah, so I don't do any of my paperback covers because I want those to be special. God, even that's wrong though, because I actually did do the cover for Wild Girl Running, but that's just a painting. So I just took a stock painting from a stock site and did that for the cover. It came out really beautiful, I think, but that was my first paperback cover, so it's it's a big deal.
Do you only do your own covers, or did you do any for Elizabeth Bedlam or Aaron Beauregard?
No. I would do covers for somebody if somebody commissioned me, but I just don't, I mostly just do my own stuff because I'm really, I'm like a one-woman shop over here. My cover artist.
Oh, go ahead.
What? No, I was just going to say.
Good.
My cover artist for my primary, my name, MF Sullivan, is Nuno Moreira, who's a Portuguese photographer who's just makes the most beautiful collages. He did the Lightning Stenography device cover that everybody seems to like, and the main covers of the Disgraced Murder trilogy. I actually just the other day updated the ebook covers of the Disgraced Murder trilogy just to be a little on market for Kindle a little bit better, because I love Nuno's covers. They're beautiful, but they don't evoke kind of what I think the Kindle action novel reader is looking for. So I kind of changed, I guess, the visual coding of the book a little bit to make it better, and it seems like it's doing a little bit better now.
What do you use? Just regular Photoshop, or do you have some other program? Or
yeah, I use Photoshop, and I get my photos from Deposit Photos for I think $30 a month is the package. Their website's such a scam. It's it's really easy. They make it super easy to accidentally download a photo without meaning to. And then they also the system is that you pay your $30, you get your 30 photos for the month, But if you cancel at the end of those 30 days, any photos you have left over will go away unless you resubscribe to another package. So I probably should start doing other people's covers, to be honest, because I've got like a backlog of something like 90 available stock photos. But, I'll get to it eventually someday.
Here's what drives me nuts about these horror novel covers that you can buy.
Oh,
This one has been used over and over and over. The Mutilation Machine, I think, or the Mutilation Mechanism. I don't remember who wrote that, but they used that cover. Jeremy C. Shipp was going to use this for a novel called Lucky, and I don't know why he needed a Kickstarter to write it, but I think he ended up not writing it because it didn't get enough backers. I don't know what the connection is. I don't know why you need, a Kickstarter to write a book, but Jeremy C. Shipp is a pretty well-known name. He's won awards, but he used this same image for his cover. Was going to use it that other people had used. I've seen this one over and over for covers of books. They're like 99-cent, amateur horror type deal. It's just over. It's a cool image, but when you see it, as like a cover for several books, that's like that's really that's.
It's very generic. That's weird. I didn't even realize that prefab covers were a thing until like earlier this year. I think I was just doing a little bit of market research on probably the erotica authors subreddit, and somebody linked to one of these sites, and I was like, fucking pre-made covers, what the hell is this? Even people on Smashwords can get into MS Paint and cut out some. Simon McCarty just sent me a couple of titles on Smashwords that just look like absolute garbage, and obviously the covers are not very good. But it was like, they tried. They made custom covers that suited their genre, and, you have to respect that. These prefab covers, though, it's like, that's just for people who just want to fill out their catalog, I think, and just are willing to literally put out whatever. I might be filling my library as fast as I possibly can and trying to publish one story a week at least, but by God, I do have a certain basic threshold of quality that I am trying to meet.
If the world ended now, basically, or civilization did, and I still had all my books, including Kindle, I'd be like that guy in Time Enough.
Yeah, Time Enough at Last. for
Twilight Zone, and I don't have to wear glasses, so I would be set for life on reading material if I never bought another book right now. Seriously.
I'm sure.
Jesus, 445 or 4,600 books just on my Kindle, and then you look around this room and there's a bookshelf everywhere there possibly can be, and they're double rows on every shelf. So yeah, I've got books that I don't even remember owning that surprised me, at every turn. So
I'm the same way.
Yeah, they just crop up in every room after a while because you can't fit them anywhere,
Even with like the number of them, but also even just the books you'd go back to.
There are some that stay with me and I do have to reread, every so often. Oddly enough, one of them is one that nobody else has heard of, I guess, and it's called "Until Hell Wouldn't Have Me" by Ernest Talby. Just the ending of that is just so hard hitting and bleak, and I liked these two characters. This trucker and this basically lot lizard that he picked up and, was taking to her destination to find her daughter. And just the ending just is so, hits you in the gut so hard with such despair that it's like I have to reread it every once in a while to see like how he did it, how he made me feel that. How did he make these characters, that are kind of, bottom of the barrel, character people. How did he make me like them so much, especially the girl that this hit me in the belly,
Yeah. That's how I feel about Lolita. I listen to the audiobook version like once a year, and that's only recent. Usually I just read the paperback version because it's such a powerful book, and I really do. You described it perfectly. It's like, how the fuck did somebody write this? So it's like, it's such an amazing accomplishment, I love that feeling. Can you recommend me that book on Goodreads that you just mentioned? Because I can't seem to find it.
Yeah, what was it called? I was looking for it too.
I'll recommend it to everybody.
Thank you.
I saw it. It's called Until Hell Wouldn't Have You.
have you. It wouldn't have you.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Until you
looks like
say?
it.
until
like
hell wouldn't have you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I was thinking. I thought it was even hell wouldn't have you or something.
Oh,
Looks like it's a self-published book, and there's only like 2 reviews on it.
which is a shame because it is really all that. When I describe it, it really is that good that
Oh,
it should
man.
have more. But I remember what Stephen King said about Kubrick when he developed The Shining. I think that he said that Kubrick is like the only director that actually physically wanted to hurt people with his movie. And I never really understood what he meant. Like, what was it that made him say that?
Well, I think Kubrick had a very overbearing personality, and I think he probably did. I can understand. I think when I think about The Shining and Full Metal Jacket, and to a lesser extent Lolita, even Doctor Strangelove, all of his movies are like I would describe them as being aggressive in a way. They present you with challenging concepts, but specifically with The Shining, it's so isolating, and it's so just like you are trapped there with them, and you are, I feel like the audience, because we're so like positioned to identify with Jack Torrance for a while, especially as a writer, at least that's how I perceive the film. I just feel like, we are much like Torrance being assailed by the Overlook Hotel. And it's like you can feel the visceral antagonism of the hotel in that movie. And it's like almost like a ring-like curse where it feels like it could reach out and touch you because it's so just everywhere. I mean, especially in that scene where he's running down the hall and he like walks in on the waiter blowing the guy in the bear suit, or vice versa. I can't even remember.
Now that was
like,
not in the book, I don't think, was it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But I feel like
Technically not, but like the masquerade
been.
stuff is.
yeah. No, it's like
It's
Go
like
on.
a hint. It's like Kubrick likes to like hint at what's happening rather than explicitly state it.
yeah.
Like if you read 2001: A Space Odyssey, like Kubrick was he adopted that book exactly. It's just we're just looking at what's happening to the astronauts from like an objective perspective. We're not like there's not like a narrator holding our hand through it.
Yeah, and it's like it's also God, that movie, like the last time I watched it, I really realized how much Kubrick was making a point for Hal, and how like Hal was a living being who, in a way, in a consciousness way, he's a digital consciousness, and he had, it's just God. I was like so moved. I think I cried actually the last time I watched Hal die, and I haven't watched 2001 since because it like moved me so much. It's just I have
The
to.
robot made you cry?
Yes.
What are you doing, Dave?
Wow.
I found it very moving. I don't know.
I don't think I've read the book Dr. Sleep, but I watched the movie, and there are a lot of people who are absolute purists who say no, it's garbage. But I really liked what I saw. I don't know, and I loved the backstory of how there were different kinds of people with the gift, and they would call them pushers. Like the snake bit Andy could make people do things by suggestion. Like even when she made someone kill themselves. Not going to say who, but so there were pushers, and then I don't know. The girl was like one of the strongest variety. I thought that was cool. How it had this like world building lore type thing installed, and I don't know how much is faithful to the book it is. And that was the most horrible scene to watch when they kidnapped that little boy after the baseball game. Horrible. I mean, it was seriously torture to watch.
I thought the movie was really good. I hadn't read the book, but I liked it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the baseball boy, that was brutal.
But the final battle You know, I mean, it had me like riveted. It could still. There aren't a lot of movies I can make it through now, but I guess because I'm such a voracious reader. But that movie, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and I just hope that if I do read the book, that there's some stuff that's still there that the movie didn't, include. I hope there's something still to discover.
So Dr. Sleep, it's more about like Danny with his shining ability and exploring that.
Yeah, it kind of felt like it almost felt in that sense like the same themes explored in stuff like X-Men, like people with different abilities and the way in which that they interact in society.
Well, just looking at the title or the reviews here, Gregor, you were pretty generous, 4 stars. Autumn Christian, 4 stars. I definitely trust. She doesn't review hardly anything anymore that I know of. And let's see, what was it? Edward Lorne. He's just outright calling it absolute shit. So, and he's a pretty trusted reviewer too. But so yeah, the reviews are all across the map on.
I mean, I liked it. It was a quick read. I mean, I was pulled through it, but my main criticism of it is that the protagonist, the girl, the protagonist, not Torrance, was too overpowered. So there was no real. I never believed that she was ever in danger, really. You know
but
what I
she
mean? That
was
was
still
the
a
major
little girl,
flaw.
though. She was still
What's that?
But she was still a little girl. See, that's why I didn't in the movie.
You didn't read the book, though. You're talking about the movie. I haven't seen the movie, right? I'm
Yeah,
talking about the book, right? So in the book, she was just way overpowered, and there was never any tension related to that. There, I thought she was ever going to lose the ultimate battle at the end, right? Everything was too easy for her, too overpowered. So it was kind of like Rey from Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like,
Hey, so my sister's tuning in, so we have at least one viewer, and
Here we've
but-
got 3. So I don't
yeah,
know.
no, I'm totally kidding. But I did bring that up because I did want to do my list, and I wanted her to be aware, but I didn't know if we were doing that yet.
do it,
Guys,
man.
are we
Unless
ready for it?
Jeremy has big objections, but let's hear it.
No, I'll do mine afterward. Just remember, Phoenix, because I know that you are sometimes, how shall we say, very verbose and can, really expound at length on your, thoughts. Try not to write a novel with each one, but just give us a hint, an overview of why we should read it.
Yeah. So
I'm interested.
I've been thinking about my philosophical expositions, and actually the flip side of what I'm able to do is someone who speaks or writes very concise and leaves a lot of things unsuggested. And I'll admit that is really hard for me, just as a skill, even though I'm aware. But yes, I can do like brief. Should I limit it to like 10, 20 minutes? Do you have a time frame? Because that'll help me focus.
What, the overall thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you never know who else might pop in.
Totally.
And, I did have a special announcement.
Okay.
And plus I'm going to do my list, and I'll try to be brief as well.
So
But,
how much should I limit it then? Yeah.
I'm not going to give any
Okay.
guidelines.
Well, then
Just-
I will. Yeah. Then I will. I'll limit it. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I've actually been thinking about that. Leaving things unsuggested. So yeah. So this is my list. Let's see.
Take your time.
I'll take my time not speaking and keep the suspense.
Yeah, take your time, but hurry up. What are you trying to say?
So my all-time favorite that I read this year, which does not count as part of my list because it's obvious, is The Talisman. So I don't need to say anything about that. But I did read it this year. I had 2 honorable mentions, which I put on this list because they were difficult to read and I liked them for what they were. And I was going to say really quickly that part of the way that I constructed this list is by having it to where I didn't just focus on my favorites. I also focused on the books that maybe I normally wouldn't have read or that impacted me in some way. It wasn't like aesthetic or even the pleasure of the books necessarily. And the other component to this is I wanted to add plenty of books from writers that I know. I wanted to add Bram with Poem 3 a.m. I wanted to add Skullface Boy. I wanted to add Elaine. But I thought I would keep it focused. So the two honorable mentions, and I guess you can pull this up on Goodreads if you want, Jeremy.
Gotcha.
But Dahlgren by Samuel Delany, which is, I think, a very transgressive book, which is odd that we talk about transgressive and I have a completely different definition, even though I do actually think this book, even though it had traditional elements of science fiction and fantasy and very, very strong literary prose, it actually had a lot of really taboo subject matter. And I think Samuel Delany like really delves into that. So I liked it. There's also an alternate cover, which I haven't seen. Oh, no, it is actually on there. I like that cover. Yeah, it's the first one, that one. Yeah. That one is a cool cover that I think actually captures the beauty of the book, even though I have no idea what it is. But yeah,
that's
it's
the one I have.
really okay. Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
discussion.
That one.
So I mentioned that one as an honorable mention. The other one would be 1Q84 by Murakami. And I read that one because I really wanted to. It wasn't, and because I really like Kafka on the Shore. The thing that's interesting about this book is that I didn't like it as much when I read it because I felt that it needed to have more of a resolution / arc, and it didn't. But I realized later that the book really is genius, even if like it wasn't my favorite. Basically,
that
because
was
of
great.
all of the risks he took. Like I didn't think it was really that enjoyable, but it's so like cinematic, which I normally wouldn't imagine as much for writing because I care about the language a lot. But in terms of what the book is doing in scope, really is really remarkable. Like he's a very good writer. So I had to give him credit on that. So he was the other honorable mention. Now to delve into the
What did
list.
you put on your real list then, if that's not on your real list?
No, I know, because I ran out of room.
Okay.
That was honestly why. Yeah, because I did want to add it, but okay. So so that covers those. So now onto the actual list. Okay, so Journal of the Plague Year by Daniel Defoe, not Willem Dafoe. It was a book written, I believe, in the early 1700s. He wrote Robinson Crusoe as well. I don't know if anybody's read that. I picked up that one. At the time, I didn't know about The Journal by Albert Camus. Not The Journal, The Plague by Albert Camus, which I didn't realize until later. But actually, the reason why I picked up this book is because it was about a pandemic. And the prose is beautiful. Probably because it's a little bit older, so it's had some time to sit like a fine wine. But I really like the writing in that book. I like what it captures. And one of my ideas that I extrapolated from it is thinking about how I think that things in life do wax and wane. And I think that that's a powerful message with thinking about how even pandemics pass, you know, even tragedies pass and natural disasters and various things. And that just gave me a lot of perspective. So I really liked that. The next one would be Carl Sagan's Cosmos, which I really like as well. I have tried to read it multiple times and I'm not even done with it because I think it's very dense. But I really like it, and I had to include it on this list. Lower on the list because it wasn't my favorite. But in terms of like astronomy, you know, I work at a planetarium, so there's often like these themes of space. And it's very interesting how he talks about astronomy through the history of not even philosophy, though he does talk about philosophers, but also scientists. And I think one of the ideas that is so, I think, profound about this book, I mean, certainly I think Carl Sagan was a materialist. He's very much like fitting in the tradition of hard scientists, though this is not science fiction. It's definitely nonfiction. But I think the book captures the desire for beauty in, like, if you're thinking about how grand the human understand, or how grand spaces compared to the human understanding, it's really a remarkable theme. The fact that we may be able to analyze these things, but they're not easy to analyze. And even though I don't know if this is intentional from a scientist perspective, it just really left me a lot in awe that we've like tried in so many ways to try to understand the universe, but how it's like super beyond us in so many ways. And I really like that theme. The other theme is also the notion of humans trying to understand the universe. So basically, like how it is still filtered through Carl Sagan's perspective, even though he's using like actual discoveries in science to talk about the universe. So I really like that. So the next book is one that I think Zach would not like based off what he said, but I had to include it here. It's The Red Book by Carl Jung.
Oh, yeah, buddy.
as contrasting this with Philip K. Dick's Exegesis, those two books, I'm not done with either of them, but they capture if a writer was going to tap into their magnum opus, not in the sense of just sophistication, but also something like mystery or amazement, or just like completely like almost like splitting off from their more rational perspective, like that, you'd end up with books like the Red Book and the Exegesis. And I think the reason is because so at least specifically with the Red Book, he's exploring his own consciousness. And I don't know if you had any thoughts on it, Regina, by the way.
Have you read this, Regina, as well?
Yeah, buddy, I could talk about it all day. I just wanted to ask, did your volume have the beautiful, the
So
illustrations?
I did not get those because I got specifically the reader's version. I know that was part of it, and that was a huge part of it. The reason why I didn't do it though is because I am more of a word kind of person, and I wasn't sure if I would be able to lug around a 1,000-page book. So I know that like there's like a problem with that in terms of it's limited, but I don't know. I felt a little bit more concise with this book.
Did you finish this book this year, or are you still reading it?
No, I'm still reading it. So this was unfortunately another one I haven't finished yet, but that I included on the list because of how much it impacted me.
Okay.
And I had to include that one.
Well, Jeremy says you're not allowed to put a book on the list unless you finished it.
I didn't
Did
say
he really say that?
No, I
Oh.
He never said that.
Yeah.
What objection does Zach have with Carl Jung? What's wrong with exploring the subconscious? What on earth?
Because Carl Jung wrote a book about the occult, and he was allegedly an occultist.
Yeah, I think. Well,
But the Nazis aren't. That's the thing that always gets me. He devoted an episode to with an expert, a self-professed expert coming on and saying the Nazis were not into the occult. That's what I took away. But everybody else throughout history was. But the Nazis actually really were, and some of these other people aren't.
No, he was saying that Hitler wasn't, but the guys surrounding him were.
He was. Okay,
Hitler
but
himself
I'm
probably
just
wasn't
clarifying
that
what the
into
guy allegedly said was.
Okay.
That it was Hitler that was not into the occult, whereas his people surrounding him were. But I don't know.
Anyway.
So if I was going to understand the argument from like an intellectual perspective, I think Zach very much sees Carl Jung as being a pagan. I don't know why, because he's actually extremely spiritual and even, I would say, religious. He's very, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would agree with that assessment based on what I know.
In fact, what's interesting about Jung specifically is that he broke from Freud exactly for those kinds of reasons. He wanted to explore religion. He wanted to explore spirituality. He wanted to explore the mind and the unconscious. And he felt that Freud was way too reductionistic and materialist. So,
yeah, this is a book that I would like to read, but I can't imagine never actually doing it.
You should, man.
Yeah, I recommend it. And the reason why I chose this one to put on my list is because of the impact, as I said, in the sense that he very much is digging into the psyche.
All right.
And what's really interesting is like I'm a little bit skeptical of the notion of the archetype or the archetypes and the collective unconscious, in that it's hard to actually like prove as a scientific concept, even though I think in some of his writings he tries to do that. But I don't feel like that's the point. And when you actually look at this book, there is a lot of that playing out. Like he cites the Bible, he uses characters that are familiar, he uses archetypes, and it's just remarkable that this is in his mind. And I think honestly, if a writer really wanted to explore themselves, or an artist even, tapping into these like very difficult themes and tapping into like finding a way of tearing down our own boundaries with our art, to me is really what I took away from this book, because I think that's powerful.
Yeah, I haven't finished the Exegesis either, but I've got that and I pick at it every once in a while. Has anybody actually finished that?
I have not finished it. I'm still working my way through it as well. We should race.
Yeah. So we can all race and see who finishes fast.
Yeah. I was just gonna ask, have you fellas read I have several of his collected works, Carl Jung's that is, and probably my favorite one is 9. But you mentioned kind of you feel like there's not a lot of proof of the unconscious. To me, I feel like what we're really talking about, the archetypes, can be kind of represented as like a taxonomy of fiction almost, and a taxonomy of imagination and of dreaming. And I think in the way that birds and bees and all the other physical animals that we are able to apply taxonomy to are self-evident because we experience them, I think in the same way, the archetypes of fiction are kind of self-evident because we experience them, and the same thing is true of archetypes of dreams and active imagination like Jung.
I'm glad you
but-
brought that up.
Go on.
Oh, just in the sense that, yeah, the reason why I'm skeptical is because not because I don't think it's possible, but because it's ironically because it's intuitive. Because I agree with you. I don't think these are easy ideas. I think it's easy for our logic to decimate such kinds of theories because we want it to fit in an explanatory category, for lack of a better phrase. We want it to be immediate, and it's not. And that's why I chose this book on this list.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to. I'm glad people chimed in, but I also want to make sure that Jeremy can go.
Yeah.
I really am glad people chimed in, though. I was hoping people would.
Read
So
his
the next-
Collected Works 9 if you haven't read it.
Okay.
Really-
Yeah, I will.
What are you saying? You're kind of breaking up. What are you saying, Regina?
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
I was telling him to read Carl Jung's Collected Works number 9.
Okay, all right. That's what I was. Yeah, that's
I've
what I
read
did.
part of Man and His Symbols. That everybody told me that was the good place to start.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's a
is.
good one.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Yeah.
I haven't read any Jung yet, but like I think it was either earlier today or yesterday. I actually read an article that talked about how there was like one Japanese professor who was a sort of student of Jung, but when he came back to Japan, he realized he had trouble applying Jung's theories to a lot of Japanese folklore and so forth.
He had a hard time or easy time?
He had a hard time.
Oh, why was it hard?
I guess it's just trying to take this European idea and apply it to a Far East Asian.
The European
culture.
idea of the archetypes.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's like the ultimate argument of the article I was reading was that fiction can't be divorced from its cultural context, and
Okay.
trying to come up with universal theories about fiction is not a very good project.
Well, I don't know that it's not a very good project, but I think that. Well, I don't know about universality, right? But I'm talking about. I think it's a fine endeavor to tackle, but I think you do have to understand that the archetypes in the Western mind are going to be different than the Eastern mind. I would think, and that's probably why it didn't graft, right? Well,
I also think the mistake would be forcing that kind of, because if you force a model onto anything, of course it's going to implode.
yeah. And so, who was this protege that talked about this, or attempted to take these theories back into the East and seemed to fail? Do you know?
I can't remember his name.
Because that would be interesting. Because that kind of thing, that kind of stuff, kind of fascinates me, right? When the difference between these. Because I mean, there is such a huge split between the cultural traditions, right? As far as just the stories and this, I mean, it was East and West, right?
Yeah, I think the article was called something like "Why Folklorists Hate Joseph Campbell" or something like that.
Okay.
That's funny.
That's fair, but I do think Joseph Campbell took some of these ideas in a different direction, because I've heard similar complaints, but I feel like there's enough looseness in Jung's theory that you wouldn't like force it, or like you have to apply it to certain situations. That's just my reading, though. I mean, I understand, because then otherwise what I would have to say is that maybe it is limiting to think of things in archetypes, at least as far as the scalability of it, or the ease or the intuitiveness of it, that maybe it is hard to actually organize like personalities or civilizations or even just people. So, but anyway, the next book would be, so this, I'm not sure what this title would be, but just look up Lewis Gluck, because I have a collection of her poetry. And there's one specific I got once. Oh, so it's Louis, but it should come up if you type that. Yeah, so yeah, it's that one with the Saturn, the rings of Saturn. Yeah, so I have that one, and I've only read the first couple collections, but I was blown away with this book. So just to be clear, I describe myself as definitely having a bias toward, well, not even bias, but well, what I would say is that I write experimental fiction, I write experimental poetry, but some of that is because that's kind of what I've internalized in college. And so I'm always looking around for different kinds of writers. And one of the problems that people often think of poetry that is often not experimental is that it's sentimental. So it's not very good. You know, writers like Mary Oliver, as an example, I think has gotten criticized for that, or even Shakespeare might be too generic. But the thing is, Lewis Gluck is like a little bit in between both of those traditions. I don't think that she identified at all as experimental, but she's very, very interesting with language without making the language like too much of the point. Because it is poetry, but she's also saying something. And I just love that balance because I think that's hard to achieve. And again, I'm not even saying she's influenced by experimental literature, but I like this book because it challenges my taste or my internalized taste, and it forces me to look at poetry in a different way, which is always what I'm doing. So I really appreciated her poetry for that.
What is her focus generally?
Well, speaking of the mundane, I mean, she does very much focus on everyday experience, but the words are so beautiful. Like, yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't start with this one because this is basically her collected works. I mean, I think she's still alive and still writing, so she's probably still written like 8 years of poetry at least from this point. But I really like that it challenged my perspective of poetry because I don't find it sentimental at all. I find it extremely creative, and she did win the Nobel Prize, so that was probably there were reasons for that, and I just find that remarkable. So
Did win it?
yes, she did. I don't remember what year. I think, yeah, winner of Nobel Prize, I think in 2012. So
She's still alive?
yes, I think so. Yeah. I know you're not a fan of poetry, Jeremy, but you might like this book or one of her shorter books, like, forget what it's called, but any of her shorter books because just that like very like focused kind of ability of writing. Because it doesn't feel distracting like the poems that she's writing, and there's enough of a narrative. But anyway, that's just my thought.
All right, I'll borrow it from archive.org.
Yeah.
Give it a look.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you have to read it, obviously, but
Cool.
the next one is Hamlet by Shakespeare. Speaking of
All right.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of language, I wanted to read this for the language, but also because Shakespeare is influential, obviously to the point to where he's ubiquitous, which is frustrating, but at least in the sense of his ability with language. So compared to people like Edmund Spenser, he's actually very much, I would say, easier to read than Spenser, because Spenser was like using an older style, even at the time, which was in the Renaissance. But Shakespeare, the writing is just familiar enough to like really like internalize this beauty of language and ideas. There were a couple parts, though, I'll admit, if they were like acted out, it might come across as a little bit cheesy. But I think that's more because drama is always like capturing different elements, and it's not so much. It's more the way that we like think about dramaturgy or drama. I don't think it's actually the play. I think it's the way that we interpret stories. But yeah, I mean, it's Shakespeare, so you can't go wrong.
Have you gotten a chance to see Hamlet or any other Shakespeare live?
I need to. I haven't. Well, I have seen Shakespeare live, but not Hamlet.
What do you think it is about the character Hamlet that endures so much? Is it that he tries to be a good man in an unreasonably bad world? I've heard that a lot.
And
Yeah.
since Jeremy's a pretty good reader, we should get him to recite the "Alas, Poor Yorick" monologue sometime.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think
That'd be
I
cool.
have before actually.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, maybe later. So, I mean, what was it your first time reading this year?
I think I read parts. So I was supposed to. So I did read most of my books in high school, of all things, but there were some that I just didn't because like they were like I couldn't finish Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and I still regret that to this day because I have a mountain of books I've read by him and not that one.
I have not read that one yet either. I always intended to read Crime and Punishment and War and Peace side by side. And
Okay.
one day I plan to do that, but I mean, it's way off, you know.
But I mean, at least at the time, like it was too dense for me, I think, in complexity, so I didn't appreciate it as much. But I have the complete works of Shakespeare in paperback, which I really like. And it was just sitting on my shelf, and I was like, I'm always thinking about good writing, always trying to wonder like what makes writers resonate with people, and Hamlet's a popular one. And what's really interesting about Hamlet is there were like 10 different times where I've heard those quotes, like just in other media or that people would say, and I can't remember any of them now, but they were like really common quotes. Like it was nuts. I had no idea those all came from Hamlet.
Yeah.
So
Shakespeare was memed before memes were a thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah,
that's a good way to put it.
I'm
Yeah.
embarrassed that my initial exposure to Hamlet, my first exposure to Hamlet, was the Mel Gibson movie. But and I just remember at the end, like just glued to the TV, like, holy shit, everybody's dead here, man. This is awful.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just like Shakespeare's stuffy and boring. It's like, dude, there's like murders. There's
Oh, it's so good.
there's fucking the drama, adultery. It's awesome.
My
That
favorite play of all time is definitely still Macbeth. It's so fucking good.
Have you seen
Have
the
you guys-
Fassbender version of that?
I actually couldn't sit through it because I didn't like their depiction of the witches. And it's like there are so many good depictions that I don't fucking want to even bother
What
sitting through
version,
it.
film version, do you recommend of Macbeth? Because I like Macbeth quite a bit.
Boy, that's a really good question. I'm mostly into it because I live in a town with a Shakespeare festival,
Mhm.
and I had read it before, but then they put on just an amazing production in 2019, and I think I saw it something like 5 or 6 times in that year because it was so good. And obviously it runs for the year, and then they're never going to do that particular production again. So it was like, see
Right.
it and absorb it as much as you could. And it was just, I loved the production. It like really put a lot of interesting emphasis on the Macbeths having lost a child, which I think is kind of a trend because I think that's what the Fassbender movie kind of went for.
Mhm.
Gosh, I'm really trying to think if there has been a version recorded that I really jived with, and I'm not really sure that there has been. I don't know if I would recommend any recorded version I've seen yet. The thing I'm maddest about for this, well, I'm mad obviously about a lot of things with 2020, but someday when things are normal again, I would really like to return to New York and get a chance to go to Sleep No More, which is like an interactive kind of weird, not really escape room, but definitely not traditional performance kind of version of Macbeth, which is supposed to be really interesting and a cool experience. But anyway, I'm sorry, I did not mean to hijack. I just wanted to ask you guys if you had read Macbeth and or Titus Andronicus, because Phoenix, I feel like anyone who likes Hamlet at all will enjoy both of those.
Yeah, I need to read Titus Andronicus actually. I want to tap into his history plays and actually read his trilogy. What do you think of that? Because the histories aren't usually talked about as much.
They've been doing the Henrys here for the past like 3 or 4 seasons.
Okay.
So we got through I want to say, we got Henry IV was really good. Henry V, part 1 and 2. I think they would be really dry to read, but
Okay.
I think it's worth reading.
Okay.
And then Henry VI, the way they were doing it, it's frustrating because they have so much talent, but they're trying to like appeal to other people in other companies. So because of that, they're working with other companies, and they're bringing this group from. I don't want to complain about this because it's going to make me sound like really like, I don't know, red pilled or something, but it's this all female version of Henry VI. But what pisses me off is that it's a version, an all female version where they are, they like really drastically cut down Joan of Arc's scenes, which are like the most interesting scenes, certainly of the first Henry VI. And it's like, man, to me, it just was like really kind of a, I don't know. I'm not really a Catholic anymore because I'm such an occultist, I guess, that I'm like, I'm still very religious. I'm still very serious about God. But I just, I'm not Catholic anymore. But because I was raised in the Catholic faith and because I think it's strictly speaking
technically right. I mean, a lot of my practice is derived from Catholicism, but just, in spite of that, I don't identify, but I still get kind of twerked off when I see. I perceived the cuts of Joan of Arc's character was really because they just didn't want to touch on the religious stuff. Because there is a little bit of an SJW contingent, I really hate to say it, that this theater company is appealing to. And I understand why they're doing it. I understand, why they really work hard to try to do things like this that are experimental or whatever. But the fact is that they're not really going to run Henry VI very often. So it's like when you do Henry VI, I guess I would prefer that they do Henry VI as like just a pure version, so I can kind of see how it's supposed to be, instead of seeing like an all-female version that's like drastically cut. I mean, every Shakespeare play is going to be cut a little bit per production. Hamlet is like 5 hours if you run it the whole text. So because of that, there are quite a few scenes that are traditionally kind of cut. And the version I saw, man, it was the coolest, you guys. I didn't realize it was going to be like this. It was a doom metal Hamlet.
That sounds awesome.
So cool. It was badass. We have a beautiful Elizabethan theater here. It's a replica of the Round in London. And it's like the Globe, excuse me. And it's like so beautiful. You can see the stars. And there's a big balcony, of course. And so it was like I sat down, and I think we might have been in like certainly the first couple of rows, but maybe even the front row that year. I can't remember. And it was like there is a big drum set up in the balcony, and I was like, "What is this?" And then this huge metal dude comes out with the long hair, And he's got a guitar. And it was like, "What is this?" It was this awesome Hamlet with this great doom metal like atmosphere and music and cool stuff going on in the background, and it was grimdark, actually, is a good way to describe it. It was so good.
That sounds really cool. I do want to make sure Jeremy gets to go.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I appreciate it.
Culturally enriching discussion, Hamlet's good.
Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed because I haven't read Hamlet itself, but I've read variations on it. I've read Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and I've also read Hamlet Machine. I need to read actual Hamlet.
Yeah, you should read it. It's great. Anyway,
I'm
please
glad.
go on, Phoenix.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just didn't. I want to make sure that Jeremy can go.
What are we on now? 6, 5?
So I have 5 more.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, no, and I'm glad that we were able to talk about Shakespeare, because I think people don't really appreciate what Shakespeare was actually doing, because it's kind of like you have to read it in high school, and by that point you're not interested. But as you said, it's culturally enriching, and for obvious reasons. I mean, I'm glad that people talk about it, and I do need to read Titus Andronicus. So
yeah, you got to.
Is that Roman Empire Titus or somebody else?
What's that?
Is that the Titus from the Roman Empire or someone?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Really
so
good.
Is Brother Domitian in it then? Or?
You know what? I don't know. It's not the emperor. It is I think it's a Roman story.
Okay.
It's just about revenge and cannibalism and rape and a woman being horribly mutilated and revenge, and I think
so all of the interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's probably my second. My first favorite is Macbeth, and just from a sentimental point of view, my second favorite is Midsummer. But I would probably say that my third favorite is Titus. I just love it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the next one is Beautiful Boy by David Sheff, and Sheff is spelled Sheff. So this book is about addiction. As you can see, they made a movie about it, featuring Steve Carell. I like the way that he acted in that movie, which I've also seen. I read this one because I was trying to understand addiction better, and because I feel like I understand some of the processes because of my own challenges with mental illness, but there are also other components such as the the way in which it like changes behavior through impulses that I found confusing, because I often see myself in many ways, at least I hope, pretty restrained. But I also understand that like humans are complicated, and we can be impulsive, and we can be messy and irrational. And I really I wanted to understand how addiction forms. There's so many interesting thoughts about this, that addiction isn't even biological as much as it is social, which is really interesting. And there's studies on that. But this book is basically literally, so the companion piece, which I haven't read too much of yet, is Nick Sheff's Tweak. But Tweak is from the perspective of Nick Sheff, so David Sheff's son. But I read Beautiful Boy, and basically I would describe the book as being very logical. It talks a lot about the science of addiction, and there's a lot of elements that deal with just like what it's like to have a relative that you love, be torn away by drugs, especially the really hard drugs like methamphetamine and heroin, and how strong that grief is, and how David's just trying to understand what's going on with his son because he cares about him. I mean, how could he be so unhappy if like they have everything, and they have love and everything. So it was very moving. I found myself breaking down a couple times reading it because it makes so much sense. And even the parts where David's just like, this is the way it is, and it sucks, and I can't change it. I have to set the boundaries, and I have to do these things. And it's just like, man, like, obviously you care. Like, why is it that you can't change it, But I think the book has a lot of hope, too, because through that love, they're able to identify a lot of healthier coping mechanisms and the support, which is extremely important, and being able to rewire the brain in profound ways through these kinds of.
When you say rewire the brain, you mean that because a lot of times drugs, particularly of the stimulant variety, the amphetamine types, will like they'll wreak havoc on the reward system in your brain.
Yes. So the way that I understood it in the book is that it depletes your dopamine receptors. So dopamine is when you feel pleasure. So dopamine is released when you feel pleasure, but the receptors get hijacked by the drug. So basically you need more and more of the drug to even get any kind of high because your receptors are depleted.
Have you ever seen somebody like that you could tell they were on stimulants, whether it be like crack, meth, or even just Adderall, like prescription variety stimulants, that they can't be happy? And I mean, I've taken diet pills, and I've veered into the more extreme kinds of stimulants, recreationally, and I can say that I may have felt juiced up and jazzed at the time, but that didn't change the fact that my jaw was clenched like a motherfucker, and it was sore for like a week afterward, like every time. And that's why, I'll only go on a bender like every few years with that stuff. I'm not saying do drugs, but if you're going to, maybe downers are at least safer than any kind of uppers. And that's my take on it, But
I have never been into uppers, and I've always disapproved of them. And personally, I hate them. I used to work at a convenience store, and I could tell when people were coming in. There was a very nice couple that were always very polite, probably because I wouldn't have given them their cigarettes if they weren't. But the woman's eyes, you just like they were going crazy. You can tell when people are tweaking. You can tell
and it doesn't feel good, even though they think it does, because they're so tight and wound up that like their muscles and like I said, jaw, that they're sore for days afterward, unless they keep doing it. I mean,
well, the hard thing about it is, that the drugs really do hijack the person. I mean, at least that's the kind of impression you get with David dealing with his son, because obviously like he really cared, and he was like trying to figure out like why it wasn't enough to help him. And it's basically because you're basically in a different world at a certain point. Which I think is what makes the drug so dangerous from reading the book.
Yeah. Well, did he live or did he die?
So he's still alive. Yeah. So Nick is alive. And last time I saw, he's been sober for 8 to 10 years, roughly. Okay. So it was a lot of struggle, but he's made it, and he's on Twitter actually. So, and I think he might still be writing. Nick Sheff is a writer too. I've read a couple of his books. But Tweak specifically is I didn't include it on the list because I haven't read it, at least most of it. But often this book is recommended with Nick Sheff's book because they go together. It's the two different sides of the perspective type of thing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So the next one is called The Power of Babel by John McWhorter. I would just type in, Power of Babel and should come up. Yep, that one. Oh, the language one. Oh, yeah, so it's EL. Yeah. So my friend recommended this one to me. Oh, it's the first one. My friend recommended this one to me. And I haven't read all of this book yet either because it is really dense. And I'm not even sure what he's doing later on in the book because it gets very technical. So I'm not sure how it all relates yet. But at least the first half of the book, what I really enjoyed about it was the way that he described language itself, like from a linguist perspective, not a poetry perspective or writer perspective, is the way that language doesn't follow like the kinds of norms that we would expect it to. So like languages, if you're comparing them, they're very different from each other, which is amazing. Like how different they are from each other. And it's because they follow different rules. There's this notion that he uses called growth, overgrowth, which is where languages kind of end up adding like new rules just as we use them, which is amazing. Like it's like language really is this organic thing. If you remember Burroughs' expression of language is a virus from outer space. So it's this thing that just continues to, granted different traditions, but it's this thing that evolves, which is really remarkable. And the idea that I took away from it, because I'm very much influenced by Chomsky's, Noam Chomsky's ideas of language, comparing them with this book specifically. Because what I ended up with, just to summarize this, is that language is infinite, but the reasons are unexpected. We already know that language is infinite because of, at least you could argue this, because of context and because of the way that language works and the kind of endless interpretations of words and some other reasons. But what's fascinating is language also doesn't technically need to follow a rule. So when you're talking about pigeons and like languages that form from when there's like a clash of different cultures, those form out of necessity. So like when workers are out on the field, like they have to be able to communicate. And so language is extremely organic. And I'm so excited by that idea because it really has a lot of implications for writing itself. The idea that there is no standard language, there's no standard English. We just assume there is because of norms and because of culture. But actually language itself is much more organic.
You know who needs that book, Jeremy, is your fucking the MMA buddy, your flat earther friend.
Oh yeah.
He definitely would
What was
benefit
it he
from
said?
this book.
What was it he said?
Oh, all kinds of shit. 1 + 1 does not equal 2.
If I were to show him this book, what do you think he would say?
You just say, man, that's just a book. That's not anything.
You're not
That's
showing
not
me
a
anything.
fiction.
That's just a book. That's just a picture.
What is that book going to tell me, man? I need to experience it. Can you experience words? Oh my God. I was contemplating. Jeremy, let me tell you, that guy fucking threw off my whole fucking week. I did not write for a week because I was
Seriously?
so shook. I was so shook that someone could think that way. I just could not fucking write. I was in despair for like a fucking week. And like all kinds of other shit happened later on in the week. So I feel like talking is an omen.
That's why by the end I was just making your mom jokes.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't care. You can say whatever. I don't like. What was it? You said that now I'm beginning to see the picture, big picture.
Yeah, the picture's coming together.
God. Just I
A lot
can't
of
even.
people enjoyed hearing you and Ben and Ann go in on that guy, though. A lot of people like
That's
that.
good. I'm glad people enjoyed my suffering.
Suffered for the art form, yeah. So what are we up to now? Book 4?
Yes, book 3, I think, actually. So Fellowship of the Ring by Tolkien. And I don't need to dwell on this one, but I had to put this one on the list.
Cool.
So for obvious reasons, I don't know if anyone had any thoughts about it, but I'm reading the trilogy right now. I'm in the Two Towers, but I read this one earlier this year in December, and I very much like it because of its complexity and the world building, which the more I read the book as a trilogy, the more I see the world building just get even more intricate. It's a great book. Again, like Shakespeare, might be a little bit over-recommended, but I do think there's a lot there, but not for the reasons you'd expect. And I love the characters. I love the idea of hobbits as being people that are considered less capable in some ways because they're smaller beings, and yet if you think about Frodo's character, it's all heart. So or Pippin and Merry, these characters, and I just find that remarkable. So,
And have you noticed how they're innocent?
Yeah.
They don't. It's not that they're like total, weebs or whatever. They are a more innocent version of man, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. So the next one, unless anyone had a thought, is The Divide Itself by R.D. Laing, and Laing is spelled Laing. Oh, have people read that?
Lang is my boy. I love Lang. He really was there for me at a weird time in my life. And I was like, am I going crazy? And it was like, no, I'm actually just having a spiritual awakening. Thank you, Dr. Lang.
Yeah. So Laing, I watched, I don't know if anyone's heard of Sisyphus 55. He's a YouTuber on YouTube, obviously. And he has an episode on R.D. Laing's book. And one of the things that comes out of that is this notion that Laing was the psychiatrist who couldn't cure himself, which says everything. So this book, I read it because there were a lot of reasons, but one was actually because it was recommended by Sisyphus 55, but also because I read some of Laing. I did a video on my YouTube channel because I'm interested in his thinking of working outside of the confines of tight clinical psychiatry to be able to explain mental illness. I think that that's a remarkable theme. I wish that more scientists and doctors would do that, even if it's a little bit harder to integrate those things. Because one of the themes that comes out of his writing in this book, as an example, is that like mental illness is still humanity. Like it's not like mental illness is this isolated thing. Like it's still what it means to be human is to have some of these maladies or to even just have this darker side of the psyche, which I think is extremely important. I wanted to understand schizophrenia and mental illness at large. So I've been reading Laing, and this book came in that recommendation, and it's a short book. It's like less than 200 pages, I think, and it's pretty readable, very accessible. But I like it because of also the hope that comes out of it too. The idea that there is a lot of potential to find, like through introspection, you can find an understanding of like mental illness and like what that's like. And so it's a very sympathetic read in that way, because of course he's not judging it in a way that a clinical setting might. And yes, in terms of the quality of, I'm not going crazy. Like this is the world. Like, yeah, you totally get that vibe.
Totally.
Yeah.
So,
you have one of those days. You ever have one of those days where you feel like you really tried, you really gave it a genuine try, just to whatever, and like it feels like everybody is going in on you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally feel that.
It's like something culminating almost, and it
Yeah.
really gets you down,
Yeah, man. Totally.
Well, and that's why I find this book to be so empathetic, because like he experienced mental illness in some capacity in his own life anyway. And it's interesting that, like Michel Foucault, he seemed to be writing to not just understand mental illness in the world, but to understand himself. And like that to me is like one of the cornerstones of good psychology, is when you're trying to explore. You could even say this about Carl Jung, actually, specifically with the Red Book, but that it's about exploring your own psyche, and through that you can understand human nature better. So it really is just empathy for people with a different mindset or with, a different biology. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
So
I think that if we treated, things like depression and even bipolar or just someone having a shitty day, if we treated it more like a weather forecast, I think we would be better equipped to respond to it than to just break down and, turn it into a, like a badge to wear on a uniform. If we just treated it like weather, it's coming, we know it's coming, but it will eventually, the clouds will, it'll get, the sun will come out.
That's so true.
But
yeah, I love that.
by the way, this is the R.D. Laing I'm used to reading. That's funny that
That's not
he's got a
quite it.
genetically similar name to this guy who I I enjoyed listening to break down on the Howard Stern show, in live, in a live setting, throwing shit at interns and, threatening to kill them and, and then crying and hugging Howard and saying, I'm sorry, but I don't belong here anymore. So I don't know. There's some sort of synchronicity, going on here with that pick.
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I need to check out. I didn't realize Artie Lang was actually another name. That's cool. Another writer.
Artie is in Arthur Lang instead of R dash R.D. So what was number 2, or is it 1?
Oh, so yes, that was number 2. So number 1. Oh, and yeah, Foucault even came up in the recommendation. By the way, I think that one is the Madness of the Madness and Civilization. So I often do cite Foucault with, Artie Lang with Foucault, more than people like Freud, because I think Freud looked at it too clinically.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend reading Thomas Zaza's The Myth of Mental Illness as well.
Yeah, that'd be a good one too. So
Freud, honestly, yeah, I don't get him. I think he was reaching with a lot of his ideas.
Thomas Saz?
No, Freud.
Oh yeah.
You secretly want to fuck your mother, so you should do cocaine about it.
Exactly. Good.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you like this recommendation actually, because I think Lang isn't not that he needs to be mainstream, but I think he's less known. But I think, at least for me and writers like that, have had a huge influence on how I look at my own well-being. So
that's not number 1 though, is it?
No. So number 1 will be The Chocolate War by Robert Cormier, and Cormier is spelled Cormier. Yep.
I've heard this one mentioned a lot, but I have no idea what it's about.
So have you read it, Regina?
No, I have heard about it, but I've heard about it a lot of times.
So this book is about Catholicism.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, and it's not about Catholicism. So basically, it takes place at a Catholic school, one of those like not even reform schools, I think, just like a Catholic high school. And it's very interesting how there's this, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's this group called the Vigils, who are this kind of like underground anarchy, like they're controlling the school, basically. And so Jerry is the main character, and his mother, you find out early on that his mother died from cancer. And this is an important point because it shows how it influences him. The Vigils immediately pick up on him, though, when they see him playing football and being in the new school. So they tell him that he's not gonna. So to make a long story short, they decide that the people in charge of the school decide that they're going to sell chocolates so they can make money, and it's implied that that money would be embezzled. So it's like not really. So there's already problems with wanting to sell the chocolates, and people know this. But the Vigils tell, as a form of defiance, they tell Jerry not to sell the chocolates. But you don't know this quite at the time until a little bit later. But what this hinges on is he decides that when everybody's like selling the chocolates, he decides that he's not going to sell them, even though he doesn't have to do it for the Vigils anymore. And that's when he really stands out, and that's when it sucks. I won't give it away, but he basically like suffers because of his decision. And this is at a Catholic school, which is supposedly religious and like caring, hopefully.
Of course. Yeah.
But instead, it's like these Vigils and the people in charge are just so corrupted, and it's painful. But it's like, wow, like that seems like the world sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good metaphor.
So I put this number 1 on my list because I was like, like this is a theme I very much resonate with. I don't think that it always ends in doom and gloom, because I think people can also, you could make arguments that, that people are actually generally pretty cooperative and good. And there's stuff to be made about that. But I think what's valuable about the book is not so much where it lands on that point specifically, but the idea that, well, a few ideas, but one of which is that innocence can still be punished, even if it hasn't done anything, obviously, because it's innocence, which is a powerful theme that, like, the world doesn't care. That's not, and I do, even though I don't like it as much, because I think the premise is pushed too much to make judgments about human nature, but I do pair this with Lord of the Flies,
Oh, okay.
though for different reasons, only in the sense that both books deal with the dark side of human nature and how people become what they become. So in Lord of the Flies, it's the kids that's evil. In Chocolate War, the kids are evil, but there are also people that are trying to do good, but they're caught in this maelstrom of chaos. So yeah, and it's it's not even children's book. It's a like young adult book before the dystopian takeover of young adult. And this book was actually recommended to me in junior high, and I didn't read it until just recently.
Huh.
So, but it stuck with me since I've read it because of the theme or themes, and it's my favorite because I find it to be just it resonates with me in that way, in a way that I find really remarkable. So yeah, that's my list. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts, but yeah, thank you, Jeremy, for letting me do it, and I hope it's enjoyable. Yeah.
Very school curriculum list, you know. By the way, we lost Gregor. I got a text from him. Hopefully he'll be back. I don't know. Something came up, but at least he got to talk to Stred. But all right, so I guess I'm up next, and I'll try to be brief. And then I don't know what I did have an announcement after that, but I'll make it brief. The honorable mention of mine is Window in the Ground by Steve Stred, obviously, because I don't feel it was long enough to warrant the place on this list. But, obviously, just from anyone who hasn't read it, who would hear us talk about it on here, I feel like, there's enough that he put in it that for people to talk about it, it would make other people want to talk about it. It has that, water cooler feel to it. Window in the Ground does, I feel. So here's my number 10, Treehouse in the Hood by Mike Nelson. There's no supernatural, there's no extreme violence. This is very salt of the earth, old Vietnam veteran in a primarily black, Hispanic neighborhood who there's constantly crime, and violence on the street where he lives. He doesn't know any of his neighbors. And he really resents, the whole situation, but he's too old to get out of it and move somewhere else. He built this house, his wife died in it. And, okay, so Gregor had to go for the night. So I guess we'll see him next week, but, all right, I bid you adieu, Gregor. And, Treehouse in the Hood. Yeah. The guy, finally decides when something happens to somebody shoots up his front yard, like the door and windows. And I don't even think they had the right house. But at that point, he comes out and he shouts, "All right, if you fuckers want a war, you got it." And he decides he's going to spend what little time he has left, going to war with the neighborhood, and he's buying a gun and stockades of ammunition. And then something happens, and he has a heart attack. And in the hospital, a woman in the neighborhood, comes to visit him with her child, and she says, "I'm sorry to hear of your heart attack and everything." And from then, when he gets out and comes home, house insurance covers it and everything, and he starts getting renovations done and everything. And there's still trouble in the neighborhood. The police are getting called out every day. Literally, every chapter, there's at least 2 or 3 police calls in this neighborhood. But he's able to describe it in a different way every time to where it doesn't really get tedious, other than from the character's point of view. As time goes on, this guy decides, hey, you know what? There are these people aren't so bad, and he wants to do things for the children in the neighborhood who have nothing to do but watch their keepers, the adults, get into all this, irresponsible bullshit. And so, drug running and drive-bys and, face-offs, all kinds of stuff. So he builds this treehouse. Everybody still hear me? Everybody there?
Yep.
Okay. And he builds this treehouse, and he even equips it with a police siren that he bought offline. And so they can, they can use it all day and night if they want to, but to only use the police siren, he tells them when there's danger. From there, it spirals out. there's these corrupt cops that the main character has interactions with, that he's suspicious of, and even an FBI agent is kind of counseling him on how to deal with that situation amongst all the crime with the going on in the neighborhood regularly. Anyway, there's a lot of deputy intrigue. There's a lot of procedural intrigue between all the departments. Bureaucratic red tape. We can't do this because we can't do anything except call this in if you want to file a police report, etc. But the point is that he becomes like almost like a caretaker for all the kids in the neighborhood, and the parents really appreciate it. And so it was a really lighthearted read, and I mean, the guy's 89, so it's amazing that he had enough energy to do what he does in this book anyway. But yeah, this one surprised me. Like I said, there's nothing weird, surreal, supernatural about it. It's a real salt of the earth, feet on the ground story. But I would recommend it. And I bought this thinking that it was the Mike Nelson from Mystery Science Theater. But
yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
That's Mike Nelson. So he wrote Death Rat, which I haven't read yet. But this is a different Mike Nelson. Yeah, it's good shit.
Ooh.
These number 9, Karnov, Phantom-clad rider of the cosmic ice. I talked to 2 of the 3 authors of this one a few months ago. You remember, Ben, right?
Yeah.
This Karnov guy has a really awesome superpower, and it's in this almost like medieval / Hyperborean time, like Conan and whatnot.
Cool. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It looks great.
And the cosmic ice is this superpower that gives him an edge over supernatural, opponents, mainly vampires and witches. And he actually gets counsel from the beheaded, the head of a witch that was beheaded at one point, and she helps him attain the cosmic ice ability. He also befriends a vampire who hates his own kind at one point, and the guy drains the blood of an elk and then uses him as like a red-eyed, glowing red-eyed steed to fly beside Karnov as he's traveling to meet his vampiric opponents. Really wicked, like old school, but like heavy metal album cover type feel to this one. I genuinely just was rocking with it the whole way. And one of these guys is in a metal band. I think it's Byron Roberts. He's in a heavy metal band called Balsagoth, which
is that like black metal?
Yeah. And he's Balsagoth is a Lovecraftian god, one of the lesser known ones. So he had a metal band, based around that name. And the other 2 guys wrote it with Byron's overall oversight. He kind of mapped out everything, and they carried it out, I guess, the on a minutia level, Number 8, First Book of Beaver. Vast climate change basically ruins the world, and this child whose parents die prematurely, before they're able to raise him to even adolescence. He's left alone, and this family of beavers basically take him into their dam and raise him. There's a huge communication gap, but oddly enough, they're able to, suss out, their relationship, what the human infant needs. That they bring him like food wrappers, and eventually he's able to learn to read by that. And eventually he acquires magazines as he reaches adulthood and is able to look back at what went wrong with the world. And as far as he knows, he's the only human left, and he's never met another human. All he knows is what is from the beavers that raised him. And it's such a beautiful book because of that, because I've always believed that animals have a soul. There is a religious doctrine that says they don't. I show some of my cats every week, and they're so expressive that I think that they would be able to fool the most religious person, that she does in fact have a soul. I do believe that they're alive. How can they not have a soul? I'm religious, so I can't reconcile this with the idea that animals are not, as sentient as us humans. But whatever, the beavers. At one point, when the guy starts to set sail, he learns how to, operate a boat, and he sets sail, and the beavers follow him all the way, into saltwater territory, where it's not exactly good for beavers, because beavers are freshwater creatures, right? Is that correct? Because I may have it backwards.
Yeah.
Beavers are freshwater, so they follow him even as he's going into saltwater levels. He just wants to see what's out there, because he doesn't know. All he has is what he reads in long since irrelevant literature and magazines, But this is really the heart of the book for me, is that he learns this system to talk with beavers by patting the water, right, in a rhythmic, percussive way. He pats at them the three percussion signal that says, go back or stop, but they keep going. They keep following alongside him, swimming beside him on the boat. And oh my God, I'm about to tear up even thinking about it. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. They would not go back, and it's like it almost puts them on a humanistic level because of their loyalty to him. He became their tribal leader when he rose to adulthood, because he learned to do things that beavers can't do. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This book, man, I can't recommend it enough. Gregor made fun of me for because I several episodes straight, I wouldn't shut up about it. But I mean, that scene is the heart of this book. And I speak to Ray Stasko, the author, occasionally. He's not in good health at all. But I think this guy actually had a mainstream publishing deal at one point with Animal City back in the 80s, I think, and he turned it all down so he could write the stuff he wants, like the Beaver, Percy in Paradise, John, Space Baby in the Bastard Universe, stuff like this. These are all things that the mainstream publishing world would have rejected at the time, and probably still would today. But at least he's writing what he wanted to write, exactly how he wanted to write it. And so this is one of my favorite authors. And, I pray for some sort of recovery for him. But, I think his writing days are behind him based on what he told me, so in confidence. So here's another one Gregor gave me shit about because I wouldn't shut up about it for so long. But this is the best vampire series I've ever read. There's one more below it called the Knuckleball series or Knuckle Supper series with like these weird dope smoking vampires. But this one is king for me as far as good vampire literature post Twilight and post Sookie Stackhouse world,
Okay.
Church Mouse is one book, and then this is Church Mouse book 2, The Change, where the main character, and I'm sorry, but I have to spoil this to justify the book 2, she asks them to bite her and make her one of them. But see, the way that R.H. Hale describes the transformation process, it almost sounds like, it almost sounds like getting cancer, the torture that this character, Rona, goes through in order to become a vampire. And I mean, so that by the time that she's done transforming and they bring her like blood in a little, baby bottle, basically, unless I read it wrong. And, she almost dies several times for all number of reasons. But when she finally does, start to adapt to becoming a vampire, and keep in mind, these all live underground underneath a cathedral in like this like suburban world that used to be a city. You know how some cities have become underground for one reason or another due to erosion or, extra architecture built on top to prevent dust storms,
Yeah.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? So this is eventually it became an underground city, and the cathedral was built on top of it. And the vampires have got this bishop wrapped around their finger because he's like hooked on heroin, and he's a real bastard because he tries to have Rona killed by turning the vampires against her several times. But it always ends up with him embarrassing him. There's a lot of character intrigue with other vampire clans, but not in a hackneyed way like with Vampire Diaries or True Blood or Twilight. I mean, it feels like how vampires would really be if they were real, and had to hide. And it even reminded me of Lost Boys when they take Rona out on her first hunt where she actually kills someone and they don't have to, extract the blood for her. I get a very Lost Boys feel from how fast it happens. I mean, we've all seen Lost Boys, right?
Wait, what was Lost Boys again?
It was a vampire. It was a classic vampire movie, man. Come on.
Stephen
Seriously.
King, I think, actually, too.
No, Stephen King didn't write Lost Boys. Whitley Strieber wrote a novel called Lost Boys, but I'm talking about the movie.
Oh, I'm thinking of the others. I'm thinking of the other vampire story. That's right. Sorry.
Kiefer Sutherland. Well, anyway, this book is the real deal, man. But definitely start with Church Mouse Volume 1. If you're going to take up the series, but this is the superior book to me. There's a lot of cries that a series only gets worse with each passing book. This is way better than the first book. I'll stand by that. And there's a tease of lycanthropes introduced near the end. So we're going to have werewolves introduced eventually in Volume 3, I'm hoping. Really kick-ass. Best vampire series I've ever read. Gregor talked about this one. And I'm in agreement that this one is just off the charts imaginative. So there's this place called the Submundo in some tropical just in South America. It's called the Submundo, and it's a territory where, oddly enough, people develop amnesia the longer they stay. And so, they could kill someone and not know it, because you're so freed from inhibitions due to these there's nearly mythical creatures that are actually real biological, animals in this space. They only live in the Submundo, and they're called duendes. And they build these strange little pyramids out of sand that people will destroy out of superstition. You never really get the sense whether the duendes are benevolent or malevolent, but the villagers who have to live, with them outside of their territory, they believe them to have very nefarious intentions. This British police officer is called in to investigate, do a wellness check on these beings called the duendes. And even he cannot, control this amnesia, this ever-encroaching amnesia. He tries to keep a journal to document his days, but still he eventually just stops using it altogether as he explores its territory and is in like a vast euphoria, and forgets all about it. And it just has that effect on human beings no matter what, I guess, except for the natives maybe. So yeah, we're dealing with a really grade A imagination here with this book. And Gregor had this one on his list as well. And Gregor also had Ghosters by Ralph Robert Moore on his list. And that is my next one. Hang on. Let me pull up the actual one.
Try typing in Ralph Robert Moore.
Here it is. So yeah, this is another one Gregor had on his list. We're in solid agreement on. Like, if I describe this as like being like Ghostbusters, it really detracts from what it's about, because these are much like church mouses. I feel how vampires would really be. This is how I feel actual Ghostbusters would actually be, but they're more like ghost hunters who are able to diagnose hauntings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You've got your flesh ghosts who don't know they're dead. You've got your sentimental ghosts. At one point, this insanely tall, like 6'11", 7 foot tall ghoster woman goes out to this guy's house, which dates back to the 18th century, where they've continuously built houses and connected one house to another. And so it's almost like a house centipede going all the way back in and through the swamp land. And she's trying to help this male widow locate his wife's ghost. And they go through several of the houses. I mean, it would take weeks to go through every house. Some of them he's never even been in. It's really weird concept. in one of the short stories here. That's just an example, and I think he finds his wife's ghost in a milk carton of all places. Probably my favorite story in this collection, and they're all related to ghosters, and sometimes they will cross paths in different stories. My favorite one, I think, though, is the one with the guy who collects ghosts in these little jars, and they end up looking like pickled pig's feet, or like specimens in a science lab in formaldehyde. Those look. And he collects ghosts in that, and he's actually got one that was one of the presidents before the Constitution was signed. The pre-constitutional American presidents. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He claims to have a ghost in one formaldehyde jar, of that. Another one's an Indian woman who was sent away on the lake or the Trail of Tears. And I mean, he collects them, and he will sell them or buy them, depending on if someone will bring them to him. He keeps them in a little barn. Really weird stories. Some of the ghosts don't know they're dead. That would be a flesh ghost. Another one hangs around and just is really inconvenient. Claims to be a cousin from out of town, and he haunts this couple to the point that I think the husband dies in a car accident trying to chase him away. I can't remember if that's how it plays out, but Ghosters is badass too. Seriously. Here's one that hasn't got. I don't know anybody else who's read this one but me. I think, Ben, you were the one that actually made me aware of this, because didn't somebody give a lecture or write an essay about this cover?
It was it was from a YouTube video about older horror books and their covers. Mm-hmm. And I think he was actually talking about the original paperback cover. I think that's the re-release.
So wait, there's another cover that they were talking about?
It's one of those, I think.
Maybe this one. Is that it? Is that the one?
I think that might be it, yeah.
That looks a lot like a Leisure or a Zebra, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's the press that put it out there?
Pan Books.
I don't know them.
Yeah, never heard of them. I think this is set in early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. When was the other edition published? 1990. Okay, yeah. But I thought they had cell phones in this, is what I don't understand.
Maybe really early cell phones?
Maybe
that's it.
Anyway, this guy is about to, get a doctorate. Is that what they do when they become doctors, right? He's in medical school, and him and his buddies accidentally run a little girl over. This has obviously consequences that will inform the plot 16 years later. There's this mute cartoonist who will draw automatically almost, these elaborate scenes from his hospital bed. He's mute, he's basically catatonic, but he will still draw when people are not watching him. And I don't really want to give too much away, because their paths are linked inextricably in a way that, if I say too much, we'll give it away. But it's not what you're thinking. There's a bit of a little bit of what territory to go through to get to that twist. But this guy has a family now, and he looks back. He's still haunted by the dreams of them deciding to bury this poor girl. It was a complete accident, but I don't know how to talk about this book without spoiling it in a way that even I could even sympathize with Zach on. So I'm just going to say the cartoonist, it's badass. That's my number 4. I really wish we could get this guy on, Bud Smith. I don't even know if he does interviews, but he probably wouldn't, just for my reputation with his peers, But Toll Booth is by Bud Smith. I previously had read his book F-250, which is a realistic fictional memoir almost. And he in this one, he takes a more of a fantastical route, because there's even a brief journey through the afterlife that the main character takes. and he becomes a whaler, I think, on one of those Alaskan boats, you know, where they basically sleep in the engine room. But Jimmy is originally a toll booth attendant, and then he raises the ire of these local kids by vandalizing their clubhouse because they did something to piss him off. I don't remember what. But this guy calls himself Kid with Clown Head, and he eventually makes a documentary about Jimmy's life and becomes famous off it. I mean, it premieres in theaters. And I mean, it's just a really weird, whimsical adventure, you know, how you get from 2 years photographing roadkill with an eccentric French millionaire chick to, you know, becoming an Alaskan boat whaler to journeying through the afterlife, and then back to see you were in a documentary. Those are what Kubrick would call the 4 non-submersible units of this story. I don't know fully what Kubrick meant when he said that. But he calls his points of his stories non-submersible units. Those would be the 4 non-submersible units of this book. So without spoiling it anymore, that's an overview of all the crazy shit this character goes through. I would recommend F-250 just as much as Toll Booth. Bud Smith he's knocking it out of the park. I know I think he has some poetry out too, but I refuse to read it just because I feel like it's a waste of his talent to do poetry. But whatever. I could not mention it. Damn, Charlie. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't not mention at least one Jeff Strand book, although I've read several this year. Dweller was my favorite until I read this. Blister, about this girl who was hideously burned by a boyfriend on graduation night, I think. And so she's become kind of like a town legend that people whisper about, you know. Well, one night on a dare or because they're drunk, high, and bored, this guy and his friends go to see Blister. Hey, man, you want to go see Blister? It's pretty freaky shit, man. They go to this little tiny house behind a bigger house, and they look in the window at this really burned girl, you know, and she sees and she's horrified and embarrassed that they're looking through the window and she's being treated like a freak, you know, but she's used to it. But the look on her face humbles the one main character enough that he comes back, knocks on her door and says, I'm real sorry about that. We were jerks last night, you know. And from there, they develop a friendship with consequences spiraling out in every direction, from a very overprotective father, and who could blame him, to a town secret that all the, people who were friends with the dad got in on for some vigilante justice, hint, hint. And some things that those vigilantes got wrong about the situation. Jeff Strand, I don't think I've ever read a book by him that wasn't at least passable. I wasn't a fan of the one that won the awards, the Haunted Monster Tour, simply because the villain seemed too cartoonish for me. And he was better when he's like working with semi-cartoonish but semi-serious villains. I also didn't like Mandibles about the killer ants too much, but even that was still above average for Strand. One of my favorite authors, but Blister is at least on par with Dweller. If it's my number 2 anyway. And finally, number 1, drum roll. And Ben, you have this, but no rush. I'm just going to tell you. Yeah, Mules by Jared Martin. Nobody's heard of this kid. I don't even know if he has social media. I don't know if he's ever done an interview for any of his books, but he's like, to me, my best kept secret on this show. Because he also wrote You Fucked with the Wrong Motherfucker. And I had to buy that just by the audacity of the title, you know?
Yeah,
and it was kind of silly in places, but it became just capable enough that, it was on my year-end list last year. Well, this right here is Jared Martin's masterpiece. These two girls go on a spring break trip to Mexico, and they think that it's going to be Texas border into Mexico, and they think it's going to be this fun thing. You know, one of the other girls backs out, and they run afoul of mules who are into drug trafficking, human trafficking, organ trafficking. They eventually get kidnapped by a cartel, and it's horrible what they go through, man. There's a gangster or someone that was in debt to the cartel. He dies, and her still mourning daughter, his still mourning daughter, is kidnapped, and they sew drugs into her body to transfer across the border. Okay. And I mean, she's still dying. I mean, she's dying. She's clearly getting infection in there and everything. But that's how much this cartel doesn't care. It's just one example. There's a nod to the final scene of Seven in this book, but that is you won't see. It'll creep up on you if you read it. This is the best thing Jared Martin's ever read or written, and I wish more people knew about this guy. This is seriously. This is my number one. It wasn't even a question when I put them all. When I put my list together, this had to go at number one.
I'm having trouble finding him online, either on Amazon or even just.
You can't find him.
Jeremy did send me this book. That he put a new cover on
It's
Mules.
horrible. The new
It's
cover is
horrible.
I don't
It's
know what
horrible.
Yes, that the
Like
one that I'm doing. The
this
one that
old
I'm
one?
doing, that's fine. The new one, I don't. There's not
It's passable. It looks like the dimensions are wrong, but it's passable for an ebook.
the new one though. What is it? It's like a cartoon strip or something.
Yeah,
Looks
no,
like a kid did it.
I found him, and it looks like it does look different from the original.
It's like a little kid
Yeah.
did it.
This right here. This is not a good representation of this awesome story.
It's
This
not showing on the screen.
It's not. Okay. Here. You'll wish you hadn't seen it though. Look at this. I've
Yeah,
seen
that's really
kids
bad.
draw. I've seen kids draw better than that. That's the
That's
thing.
pretty low quality.
Looks like that Empress Teresa book.
Yeah, it is.
Oh my
like
God.
that. Yes.
Oh my god. the guy that's like major lolcow meme territory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say I bought that one too, just to see what the fuss was about. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but apparently it's really bad, right?
Yeah,
Empress
I've heard it's
Teresa.
pretty awful.
Have you read it? Oh,
I
man.
haven't read it. No, I've read like excerpts of it, and it's the guy is either very unwell or he's just a genuinely stupid person.
But Mules, there's no question it had to be number one, even past Jeff Strand, which is saying something because that's one of my favorite authors. But seriously, this damn book, man, anybody who's listening to me, I don't know how anybody could not like Mules. It's that action-packed and that, like, trust me, when I say that even the dog has a redemption arc, okay, we're all familiar with redemption arcs where you go from bad to good. The way that it comes together at the end, and even this dog that suffers through all these dog fights by his owner, and oddly enough, the dog owner, he still loves the dog, and even though he puts him through these fights, it's just a different, harsher lifestyle, in that territory. But the dog gets a redemption arc at the end. Damn. And that feels good to even be able to say that about this, man. I mean, the way that the main character, one of the girls, gets the last laugh, fucking, I was like cheering her on, like I could not believe that she was that ballsy, that she got the last laugh like that. And I won't say how, but damn, I mean, phew. Yeah, seriously, if you haven't read this book, why not? I mean. So Jared Martin, if this gets back to you in any way, wherever you are out there, something tells me, low profile for a reason. But yeah, man, come on here so I can, talk to you about this because it's seriously awesome. That's my list. Mostly fiction, but there wasn't one theology book in there. Zach, speaking of Zach, I did have an announcement, and this is kind of hard to make and kind of easy to make. It was his choice, and I saw it coming for a while. I didn't force this choice on him, but he's thinking, he's saying he's probably not going to be around the Quiet Place much, anymore. But he might come back around every now and then, or eventually. It's just not his bag anymore. He doesn't really, as we sink further into the degradation and see how much of the bottom we can scrape of the extreme fiction barrel, it becomes more obvious to him, I guess, and these aren't his words, these are mine, that, it's really not comparable to what he's doing. I think eventually he'll go into, he'll have his calling and become a really good Lutheran pastor, or what do they have, a minister. I think he'll eventually get the calling and become like a community leader, religious, vocation of some sort. And so I think it's good that he's making this decision, and plus I really did yell at him sometimes when he didn't deserve it. But that's sometimes people just get under your skin enough, like when you're trying to talk, and he's laughing that you're frustrated about it. I should probably set the better example as the adult, but sometimes he really would get under my skin in that way. And I hope that that's not how I would be I hope I wouldn't be a bad uncle or father, based on what I experienced, talking to a guy in his early 20s right then, But it's kind of a hard goodbye, but one that I saw coming. And I agree that, for us to go where we're going, probably not going to, and honestly, I thought his year-end list was brutal. It was almost all religion except for Tolkien. That's fine, I told him to put it together, but I could never read the other 9 books that were on that list. And but I respect his convictions. I'm a Baptist, a non-committal Baptist myself. I'm a secular religious as they come. I like my fiction, I like it with some degree of violence, and I can overlook things, politically or religiously, as long as I get my storytelling fixed. And that's where I'm taking the show. That's where I see it going. And so, Zach won't be around much anymore, but he's welcome anytime. I let him stay as long as I wanted to. I almost dismissed him at one point, to gently tell him that it wasn't working out anymore. And one person out of the 8 regulars on this show talked me out of it, and I agreed, and I softened up and I was still going to go through with it. But later that day, Zach came in with a great idea for the show. And I said, all right, I'm just going to let him stay as long as he wants. I'm not going to be the bad guy. And then all of a sudden, this decision comes from out of nowhere. And it's the right thing to do, I think, for everybody. But thank you, Zach, for everything you did for the show. And, now us heathens can really explore, how depraved we can get. So
let us have our Sodom and Gomorrah peacefully.
He sunsetted peacefully. Is that what you said?
I said, let us have our Sodom and Gomorrah peacefully, please.
Right. And what's up, Phoenix?
Hey, so I don't identify as like religious at all, but I'm not. But I think I might have a different. I'm asking this based off what you said, but I do have a different taste, and so I'm just wondering like where you would see me in the future, like because I don't want to derail from like my interests, because I joined because I really liked the group. But if there was like a specific direction you wanted to take it to, I could understand.
Well, that we cover a lot of horror. And apparently I've learned that male extreme horror authors are really thin-skinned compared to female extreme horror authors. Have you noticed that? Because I sure as hell have.
Men are much more thin-skinned than women just generally.
You're probably right. Matt Shaw, Wade Garrett.
What happened with Wade? I don't remember that.
Zach called him a biker and said that. What about that one biker guy who writes extreme horror?
Oh,
That's all Zach said. And I tried to get Wade Garrett on to talk about that segment we did about how some extreme horror being too extreme, and every one of the male authors said got defensive and said, sorry, but I don't have to justify myself. Matt Shaw got really bitchy about it, And
I mean, to be fair, I was pretty harsh about his book Porn, but I do
said
stand
the
behind
cover
that.
was bad, and he defended the cover, though. That's the thing. He defended
What?
that cover still. He
What,
doubled down.
the cover for Porn. I
They just
didn't.
said porn, right?
I think it was Kevin Strange who did that, but either way, I didn't care about the cover. It was the book that I thought really sucked, and I still stand behind that. I really hated that book.
But then Wade Garrett, he listened to that segment, and he came back with, "Tell Zach I'm not a biker." Seriously, this dude had such thin skin, and I thought that I was coming from a reasonable place where I was saying, is extreme horror heading in a direction where it's too extreme? Because I'm getting to an age where I sympathize too much with people going through extreme pain and torture, and I think that's part of getting older. If I had a kid of my own right now, I probably wouldn't even be able to read what I do read. But I was just posing the question, and the answers were all over the board. Zach and I agreed that Hillary by Angel Jalique probably shouldn't exist, because that was too extreme for both of us and many other people I know, like Janie C on Goodreads. She reads everything too, and I think she said that she could only read one or two books of that series. It's seriously brutal in a way that I've never seen before. But anyway, the male extreme horror authors are really sensitive and thin-skinned, and the female horror authors are more reasonable, I've found, in approaching criticism. That's just the experience I've had. Prove me wrong, gentlemen.
I feel, for the record, I feel like I can't imagine why any extreme horror author would think it was a bad thing that their work was called too extreme. I would take that as a compliment when you just say thank you.
And I didn't. I think what my thing was like when people like label themselves as like, "Ooh, I'm so extreme, I'm so out there." I put warnings on my book covers, and the book is about snuff films. Oh boy, here we go again.
Okay, so to get back to your question, Phoenix, how I see you fitting into the show.
Yeah, I'm curious because I definitely don't have a problem if you take it in a different direction. My thing is coming from a place of relevance for like what I can contribute as well as allowing the direction that you want to take, because I do feel like one of my strengths is being able to talk about different ideas, but I also feel like sometimes, ironically, I could impede that with my own interests. So like, if like I'm interested in like fantasy, that might not jive well. If you're
fantasy
talking about
is
extreme horror.
totally, fantasy's okay. Everything is okay.
Well, because I've always liked your show because I feel like I can talk about a lot of the stuff that I want to. My thing though is I just don't have an affinity with extreme horror, which isn't bad. It's just I don't know if that's ever going to be a direction I go, and I wouldn't want that to be a problem. I wouldn't.
You don't. It doesn't have to be. There were actually a lot of them on my list that were not.
The first book especially. Yeah. No, but I just wondered because you had said that you plan on taking in that direction, so I wasn't sure.
Well, because Regina is apparently really savvy with a certain contingent of that base. But
you do still see me fitting on the show, then, is what I wondered.
Absolutely. In fact, if you wanted to become a regular every week, which you pretty much already are, if you wanted to be there from beginning to end, I would have no problem with it. Nobody will ever replace Zach completely, but I do feel that, we can explore more things without that religious, preface, that religious barrier.
No offense to Zach if he's listening, but I kind of thought that. Like, I did appreciate him having that religious perspective. The only problem is sometimes he like took it to the point where he was a bit of a wet blanket.
Well, and I just wonder because my impression of the show might have been that like you just liked having having a multitude of writers on. I didn't realize that you had a specific angle that you were. I'm just making sure.
You were good enough that I invite you back every week, and eventually you were nervous. You didn't want to come in every week, did you? I know you didn't.
No, but I did. Yeah.
I think you are still one of those unsung, undiscovered authors, see, just like Jared Martin. So, yeah, I definitely would encourage you to come on as much as you like.
It kind of funny, Phoenix. When I first discovered you, I think when you released a couple books through Nihilism Revised, and I went to your I think either your Goodreads or your Amazon page and saw the huge list of books you released. And I was like, who is this guy?
Well, thank you, Ben. I really appreciate that, actually. No, and I appreciate what you're saying too, Jeremy. And what I was going to say is, yeah, in terms of the context that I've been a part of, different, not necessarily shows, but different places, this is a place where even if I don't have the same interest in everything, I feel like what's amazing is I feel like I can actually talk and breathe. I feel like I can, even just reading The Dark Kid, that was actually quite an honor for me because I was like, who else would let me do that?
I'm excited to read the final thing, and it's interesting how the character Street Kid is kind of haunted and acted by the Dark Kid character in his mind, and somewhere Dark Kid is counteracted by Street Kid in his mind. I really love that idea, and who knows if it's alternate realities actually, or if it's some psychological head trip. I don't know. I'm interested to see what you finally decide on there. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I would recommend Clash Books as a place to get your foot in the door. But
Okay.
I do think that Christoph and others associated with that press will probably ask you to pull
Tone
it
it
down
down.
600, 800 pages to more like in the 150 to 200 range, maybe less than that. Try to express more in less words.
Yeah.
What they'd probably say
yeah.
when the editor comes,
Clash does publish poetry, so they might be interested in one of his poetry books.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I told you that I sent my manuscript to them, so they have it.
Oh, okay.
So hopefully,
They got a big slush pile because they
Yeah.
have
They've
they're
got-
doing a lot of shit. They're doing a lot of shit that other publishers that used to be, bigger than them don't do anymore. So they're publishing they got a lot of stuff. They're publishing as much as Eraserhead Press used to in their first few years, it feels like. And then a lot of good stuff. They published a book by a YouTuber named I don't remember his name. I don't know who he is, but
I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember his name either. But yeah, they've got books scheduled out to 2022, so they've got a pretty big pile there.
another publisher you might like, but maybe it could go either way. Civil Coping Mechanisms, but
Are they still around?
I think they are because they had one published for release in 2021, I thought. But it's run by Michael Seidlinger and I don't know who else. But yeah, the very, very sluggish pace for probably good reasons. But if you could get a manuscript seen by them, maybe 2 years from now they might publish.
yeah.
Clash, try Clash first.
Well, and I'm glad that you have your own tastes and things that you like a lot. And my question is, simply from what I hope to contribute, and that's why I'm glad that I'm able to even be here because I feel like it fits the show, even if maybe we have diverging interests. That was always my impression, which I appreciate because again, I think that's rare. I think a lot of spaces they want it very tight.
I want controlled chaos, like what happened last week. Even though it was a disaster, it was good for the listeners and it was good for generating, everything that happened was a disaster, I think, even up to and including the bad mic audio on Lesko's end, which is unfortunate because that dude's pretty awesome too. But and then Zach's really, really Bible thumping year-end list, which is his business, and that's fine. I think that from the point where we started arguing over Nightworms, and all the way through to the end, when I was having trouble syncing up the song properly, and then I ranted with Ann after the music went off, and she didn't know I was still recording. The whole show was a disaster. But it got the fastest rising listeners in just 2 or 3 days, and now we're already up to 400 organic listeners without me buying likes or views. Yeah, I said. I finally admitted it. We're up to 399 organic views on that video now. So clearly, that we should have more disasters. So, so yeah. I thought Ann was going to come in because she's home and she was getting herself together, but I don't know. She's always on her feet doing something crazy. I think we may miss her this trip. Hope she's all right. And so happy New Year to everybody. Thanks to Steve.
wow,
Strickland
yeah.
coming on. Do we have anything else we want to talk about or address beforehand? I did want to mention this. This was a $30 book. Thankfully, I used the gift card. What are your initials and impressions looking at that? What does that look like to you?
Well, it looks like a
What?
children's book. Looks very
It does,
cute.
doesn't it?
Looks like a comic book,
You think
Kind of
comic
like Edward
book?
Gorey, maybe.
like something similar to Moss, maybe.
Okay, this should not have been $30. I was just captivated enough by the cover that I said, okay, fine. You only live once. I'll never pay this much for a book again, but I will this time. This is what it is. Okay.
It's a photography book or art book.
Photography project. See, the rat keeps mannequins around. He doesn't
Okay.
know. He doesn't know if he's a rat or if he's human. But very
Okay.
clearly, he looks like a human in a rat mask. You see this? He's friends with the littler rats. He lives underground, and the photographs get wilder and wilder as he goes
Oh,
on.
shit.
He dresses up mannequins.
Oh, wow.
It's like an adult children's book, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Do not pay $30 for this.
Okay.
Thankfully, I had a gift card, so I didn't hurt my pockets any. But I had to give this at least 4 stars because I could tell there was a lot of legwork involved. You don't set up these elaborate kind of photographs without a lot of, there's a lot of composition in the photographs, as you can see,
Yeah,
There's a lot of
definitely.
thought in the background and what's in the foreground, and you know what I mean? So I couldn't give it 1 or 2 stars, but I didn't really come out of it liking it the way I thought I would. I thought this is some surreal thing. I thought maybe there would be more narrative, more words, but it's just that introductory paragraph and then just nothing but pictures for the rest of it. So I might check out a more traditional fictional story from Roger Ballin, but I don't know if I'll buy another one of his photography books, Roger the Rat. At least if you're going to buy somebody out there who's tantalized by this, and I doubt there is anybody out there tantalized by this, at least wait till it's used in like under $10, So that's I don't know of anything else. I'll probably think of something we should have talked about afterwards. Frank in the chat did ask if we would ever consider inviting Monica or work on. I'm all for that. If anybody thinks they can, get her. I don't know that she would talk to me, if she's big in Brian Keene's circle. But Regina, maybe you can pull it off. I don't know.
Yeah, I got interested in her work when I saw that comment come up, and I added a book or two of hers to Goodreads right away. So I'll read them and talk to her and see if I can get her on the show.
I think her most popular book is the one about the diet pill.
Suffer the Flesh.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's the one I would
No,
add.
It's I really did not like that book.
No, why is that? I remember you
Um,
reading it now. Yeah.
It has this setup of being at like a fat camp for women that women are kidnapped and forced into, but it kind of loses that whole thing. It just kind of drops it. Then it becomes grisly BDSM porn for several pages. Then it becomes a really goofy, cheesy escape book toward the end. And then the epilogue, which just fucking sucks.
Well, I'm sure she'll
Yeah,
never
but-
be on the show now, but if you do listen to this,
Yeah, I'm all for her coming on.
I mean, I did like a couple of her short stories.
Well, hopefully she's not as sensitive as Matt Shaw, because that poor guy. I couldn't believe how
That's a
thin
weird
skinned
story.
He agreed to come on, but only if it was me and him.
You didn't want me telling him to his face that porn sucked?
I agreed to it at first. I brought the idea up, and he agreed to it. But then I retracted after I thought, this dude, I'm legitimately believe that he is overreacting, and he was. So yeah, I just backpedaled on that, and he never even followed up anyway, so he didn't give a shit. So yeah, Matt Shaw is really sensitive. I did forget that I had his Haunting of the North Pole book pre-ordered. It came out on Christmas Day. That might be fun. Who knows? But that's out.
Have you guys had John Wayne on the show?
No, you know what?
John
I was
Wayne.
in a hostel with him for BizarroCon several years ago, like 2014, and he was pretty awesome. I've still got a live recording of this song he played called Buddy Holly. It went something like, "Do you believe that Buddy Holly shot everybody?" And it almost reminded me of like Green Day, and they're more sentimental. Now, some people would consider that an insult, but I consider it a compliment. You think I should play out with that, or you think he would raise a ruckus about it, or because I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think he would mind. I don't know if he even really knows about the show. I assume he does if he met you or whatever. But
we knew each other. Steve.
yeah, okay, yeah. Then
I
don't think
blew
he
up at the
would.
Bizarro
I don't
community.
know him, but
I like epically blew up at the Bizarro community for like 2 or 3 years, and I always tried to exclude him from any of my rants, but he made me, unable to associate with me by, their guilt or something. But I would love to have John Wayne Comunale on if he will come on, and I'm gonna risk it. I think I'm gonna try. I'm gonna play that beautiful song that he played that one night at BizarroCon when it was open mic. And Christoph also played something from Moses, his little band. It was an awesome night. That was when I was still cool with all those people. And we all meant well, but, then Trump happened, and, well, we can't take it back now, can we? Anyway, let me try to track down that. Talk amongst yourselves while I try to find that track, and we'll close out with that.
I think maybe Rich Bottles might make a good guest.
Yeah. Oh man, Rich Bottles is awesome. Yeah. When I was going to release that Win anthology, he was in it. He had a zombie groundhog story in it. Which ended up he ended up prophesying that because there was a zombie groundhog movie,
that's awesome.
By the way, I can't go without complimenting Kevin Strange's Christmas comic. It was really funny. It was probably as funny as he's ever done. I don't know if anyone here's read it or if he sent it to him, but I'm sure he will if you ask. He's really impressing me with how he's self-taught, learning how to draw from the ground up. Proving that you don't have to be born an artist. And he really scrapes the bottom of the barrel with the depravity, with Santa getting raped by a male, like a transgender witch or something. I don't know. Really funny though. The crackheads in it. A lot of good social commentary with the crackheads having this bag that you can hide in that can threaten the fabric of existence or something. I'm giving too much away. It's really funny. Anyway, I found the Buddy Holly song. So anything else to say before we wrap out, guys?
Well, I enjoyed today, and I've been enjoying coming on. So yeah, I appreciate you having me.
I appreciate all of you, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to see you this week, but I'm sure you're off doing your things. So anything else?
That was a cool idea to be able to do the list.
Yeah, we do that every year, so
Cool.
It gives a sense of proportion to what people might want to read and might not. I actually I made a worst of list too. Maybe I'll do that one next week. I don't know. Maybe not. Just depends on the vibe. But yeah, who's ready for Buddy Holly by John Wayne Comunale? I don't remember the name of his band, so.
I guess one more announcement from me. Since Congress thinks you're stupid and thinks giving you $600 is going to make a fucking dent in any problems, in any problems that you had during the pandemic. If you can afford it, if you donate $20 to any rent relief fund or anything like that, and send me proof of it, I'll send you a copy of any one of my books for free.
That's good stuff. I'll put that in the the description below later. But hey, just for the record, Trump wants to stab 1,200. I'm just saying.
Well, he signed the $600.
No, he didn't.
One. They,
No. As of today, he had not.
But Congress rejected the
He actually signed
$2,000
it
increase.
at the end of his very long.
Wait. Did he
No,
sign
he
one?
signed it. just a
He's
few
getting
hours ago.
$600 a day.
Do we have the $2,000 increase?
I don't think so. I think it's $600.
I got two stimulus or two what do you call it? Was it stimulus checks?
No, Congress rejected
Huh?
that.
What is it? What is it? What was the first check this year called?
Oh, I think it was just called a stimulus check the first year.
Yeah,
I got two by accident.
where it's gonna be
Ooh.
600,
I'll be worried about
They never called me on it. What am I supposed to do? Turn in?
100,000,
I don't know.
600.
I'm just joking. It didn't happen.
Yeah, that's what I would say. I would be like, hey, this is a fictional podcast about writing.
We're portraying characters. The following is in no relation to anyone living or deceased.
That's right.
All right, let me set up. This is what I hate about Audacity. It's the only thing.
I only got one.
Okay, what? I've got
What
to
was
go
it,
in
one
and
for you?
Huh? What? Go ahead, Ben. He must be having wonky problems. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I'm changing over the settings so you'll echo.
All right.
Okay.
Phoenix,
Well-
you really gotta read volume 9 and then volume 14 and then volume 13 of
What is,
Carl.
what is volume 9 called?
Volume 9, okay, 9.1 specifically. It's the archetypes of the collective unconscious, I think.
Okay.
That's the best one.
And then you said 12 and 13.
No,
Like-
14 and then 13. And
Okay.
then
Like-
like 9.2.
Your connection is bad.
But I can fucked up and kicked me.
Okay, so everybody ready for John Wayne's great song? And John,
Oh, yeah.
if this gets back to you, no offense meant. I'll remove it if I have to. But it's a really great song, and stored in it is a really great memory. I really genuinely loved this song when you played it live at the open mic night at Bizarro's Con. So here we go,
Okay.
Buddy Holly by John Wayne Communale. Good night, everybody.
Have a good
night.
night.
Thanks, guys. Till next week.
After the show, try. To leave some poor sap behind. Everything changed after that day. Who can believe the Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who would believe the Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who can believe the Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who would believe the Buddy Holly shot in her body? It was a Tuesday when we all heard the news. Called it the day the music died. Could die young while you bastards all get old. Talking about what you should have done. Who can believe that Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who would believe that Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who can believe that Buddy Holly shot in her body? Who can believe that Buddy Holly shot in her body? Not you, not me. Not you, not me. Not you, not me. Not you, not me. Who can believe the Buddy Holly shot at her body? Who can believe the Buddy Holly shot at her body?
Yeah.
Who can believe the Buddy Holly
Sing it, John.
shot in her body? Who would believe the Buddy Holly shot in her body? Now.
All right. Good shit, man. Good night, everybody, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and let's hope this madness fades in 2021, and maybe, just maybe, we can put our political differences aside and act like fucking humans again. Good night.